It says. That's a speech pattern. And also have the job that is in the music, that one. Okay, this time is good.
Oh, okay.
Welcome to stay. Gonna do this later.
So you're living there now, right, John?
Yep, we inherited the house after Mom passed away.
Where's James?
He's there too.
You're living. And where's your sister?
She's in Baltimore.
Right.
She likes big cities. She's been in last 10 years New York.
Oh,
New York.
no.
Really? See that?
Guess we're not cool enough out here.
Well, Michael's in Rochester.
Who's on? Suzanne, up, Cindy.
Oh, you do? Oh, of course. Well, he's doing the racing stuff again.
I guess Olivia is still doing some stuff going on over by the church.
Yes, she is, yes. Yes, that would be helpful too.
Pull the mic down to you.
Let's get into it.
You know what?
Yeah, I wish I could stay. But what was your name?
I know.
Good thing we didn't start on time. Good thing we didn't start on time.
Fine. How are you?
And good thing we didn't start on time. Right.
I was gonna say,
Any idea what?
not her.
Those mics are off. Adjust the gain or something?
What are we doing? I'm pretty.
Yeah. So welcome one and all to what will be the first regular town board meeting in May. Preceded, however, by a public hearing at some point on the drainage district. And the board would be happy to entertain questions or comments in that. Either people here or people joining us on Zoom. I don't see anyone waving their hand.
Yes.
So this is a public hearing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you have to use the mic because otherwise they can hear.
Can you hear me? Okay, okay. So the first thing I'd like to say is,
Is yours on? You guys are turning off.
These two are off.
No, wireless. I'm getting that out of doors. You can just turn it on when you need to speak.
Yes, try that again.
okay. So the first thing I'd like to say is I just hope the town approaches this with a.
Could you tell us who you are first? Good night.
Sorry, I'm Andrew Cove. I live at 111 Beardsley Lane, which is part of the South Pointe development. I just hope the town approaches this with transparency and communication with the people involved in this. And not just do what the minimum they have to do and kind of shove it down the people's throats. Because most of the people that are on the receiving end of these taxes have no knowledge of this, no knowledge, okay? Most of the people have bought houses from other people. They've not been involved with the developer. And the process for informing them by the town, if there is one, is only through permitting. And most of the people on the street now have not pulled permits because they didn't build their houses. So you're dealing with a clientele who right off the bat is going to feel that they're being put upon here. Now, I've reviewed the town's documents a little bit. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going back to the, and I think I'd just like to make a point that I think this is at the town's discretion. Maybe the town's going to hide behind the state here, but in all the paperwork I've seen, this is completely at the town's discretion, whether they do this or not. It's the subdivision, the final approval subdivision in August 2004 refers to this. It's quite clear that the land is going over to the town and should be deeded to the town with the approval of the highway superintendent and one other person, supervisor maybe. And the wording that's used, though, is always things like potential to set up a district. And in one place it says, if found necessary by the town. Well, we're 2023, that was 2004. So just how necessary was this found by the town to set up a wall, set up a storm drainage district? That's 19 years, almost 20 years. The engineer's report is still calling it a proposal. So if there's, and if I go to the, I think all the state cares about going to the DEC permit, which was pointed out by the engineer, is still open. It's open. They have a permit with an open developer who does not exist. They can't close the permit until everybody's built there, whatever they're going to build there. So that's still open. But I don't think the state is requiring that you set up stormwater drainage district. That all they care about is that this is built correctly and that it's maintained correctly, which really hasn't been done. There was a system, I think, as maybe I alluded to this earlier, where the town was going to notify people with permits. And as I've just pointed out, I won't belabor that, a lot of people never had permits because they're coming in, they're buying houses, including us. We were the first ones to live in our house, but we did not build the house. So the only party that has been part of this agreement or contract is the town of Danby.
This meeting is being recorded.
I'm sorry.
So they're the only party that's been consistent for the whole thing. And I don't think they fulfilled their obligations. And I think you should reconsider, and this should be dealt with like every other property in this town, which is in the general revenue of the town of Danby. Thank you.
I don't sing in the public when I speak, I have to read it. It was just a short time ago, you all remember, the South Point Development collectively wrote you all and attended a meeting seeking legal clarity on specific points in the Danby zoning laws that are absurdly ambiguous in our opinion. Our concerns of safety and future development in South Point were not answered. Now, you want to assess each property or house with an annual fee beyond the taxes we currently pay for a water district that has no mention in our deed, our abstract, or our covenant and restrictions. In closing, we really feel that the town should accept most of the financial responsibility for this, should you decide to go forward. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that name.
Oh, Deborah Montgomery, 111 Beardsley Lane.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Robert, go ahead.
Hi there. Yes, Robert Goggs, 155 Beardsley Lane. I would echo the sentiments that Andy and Deb have already raised. I think we can probably collectively agree that having systems in place to manage excess water runoff and storm surges in water is a sensible provision. And certainly 155, we would be affected were such systems not in place. But I think that what's unusual here is that this is part of the infrastructure of the town of Danby, just like any other drainage system that exists within town property. And it's unusual here that the town is proposing to launch a sub-district wherein the costs of managing particular elements of infrastructure should be borne solely by residents within the road where that infrastructure lies. In contrast, there are lots and lots of other pieces of infrastructure that affect the residents of other roads that the town already pays for and doesn't assess the costs for individual infrastructure emplacements on particular roads to the folks who live on that road. It is accepted that infrastructure that the town of Danby owns, maintains, that those costs should be borne across the entire town rather than simply the residents who stand to benefit the most from that infrastructure. I'm quite happy to pay my fair share of costs of infrastructure projects within the town of Danby, which I already do through taxation. What I think is unreasonable here is the proposal to say, well, this is an extra little thing that affects only this road, and so only that road should pay for it. There are plenty of other examples in the town where the benefits of a particular piece of infrastructure are derived for smaller numbers of people, and yet the assessment is not for those individuals or those individual properties, it's borne by the entire town. And I think that that's the approach that should be taken in this setting as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else?
I'm John Vakina. I'm at 114 Beardsley Lane. Like all of our other residents, we're opposed to this idea. My understanding of this has been that 20 years ago, or nearly 20 years ago, an agreement between the developer and the township took place because the township was required by the New York DEC to implement stormwater retention. Is that correct?
Sure.
Well, what happens if it doesn't get done?
I think if the board would like to be happy to come up.
Yeah, I think we maybe get the comments and then we can have.
His comments, though, is the
David,
idea that
that
there is additional benefit received from this. In my mind, this is, I think, an expectation of every resident that there is going to be some stormwater management in any development around. And the fact that you want to go and impose, I'll call it a surcharge or an additional tax above and beyond. The township has been collecting taxes from every one of these developed properties now since they were purchased. In my case, my house was built 17 years ago. And you've been collecting taxes on that for 17 years. We've been paying those taxes for that amount of time. And now you want to go add a tax because the township failed to go follow through with an agreement between the developer and the township. I understand it's not the resident's fault, the developer defaulted, went into bankruptcy or whatever, and then ended up having to deed it over. In my mind, it is not the resident's responsibility then to go maintain that relationship. My understanding was by design, that land was going to be deeded to the township at the end of development anyway, correct?
For the creation of the district, if the neighborhood didn't do it themselves.
Well, I think it's been alluded to. None of the residents were aware of any of that type of arrangement that has been done because, if you will, the turnover, there's been no line of communication from the original owners in most cases to current owners. So there's this huge gap in here. And quite frankly, it comes as quite a surprise now that there's this idea that you're going to come up with a surcharge or an additional tax above and beyond what we already pay to go maintain the rest of the infrastructure within the township.
I'm a little surprised that any of you would think that there hasn't been any communication between the town and the residents about this issue.
2 years ago. My point is that default occurred prior to that. And so for 20 years, I mean, literally for 19 or 20 years, if this was hanging out there, there's been none of us as property owners were aware of it until you came and started talking about this as a potential issue 2 years ago. Okay, that's my point, is it still seems like it's been kind of sprung upon the owners, and there are a number of more recent owners that were not even homeowners at the time we had that discussion here nearly 2 years ago.
Mhm.
So in my mind, there's this gap of communication. Little, I think as Andy put, what lack of transparency in the whole discussion. Okay, that's my 2 cents. Okay.
So David, could you perhaps review both the history of the district, why it didn't come to be like it's supposed to have been, why it's being pursued now, what has been done in the process, and where we are in it.
Sure. So a variety of things. First, I think it's worth pointing out and good for everyone to understand. This development was the first one that happened in Danby after New York State instituted stronger stormwater requirements. So it is true that no other neighborhood has this kind of system set up. The reason that no other neighborhood has this kind of system set up is there's no other neighborhood that has this kind of stormwater retention ponds required. So the laws changed in New York State, and in order to do a development, you were required to keep the stormwater on site and infiltrate it to protect the stream. And you can see why, if you look at Old Town Village next door, that's actually creating a lot of erosion and damage in the gorge behind it, because it wasn't designed with the kinds of stormwater features that this neighborhood was. So because of that New York State law, and because I think the town was new at implementing it, the way the agreement was set up is that as a requirement of permitting the impervious surface of the homes, the driveways, the conversion of forests to lawns, all of that creates more runoff. And so all of that needed to be kept directed to ponds and kept and maintained. Now, the best way to do that would have been if the town had required the developer to set up a district on day one that would maintain. That's not what happened. Instead, the town had an agreement that the developer would maintain it until the last home was built, and then the town would set up a district, and that the residents would pay for the stormwater that benefits them. And the way it benefits them is that it allows that development to exist. That development could not happen under the law without stormwater infrastructure. Now, you could maintain stormwater infrastructure on each individual site. That would be an option. There isn't stormwater infrastructure at each home, it's shared. Another way this could be done is by having a homeowners association that owns it and takes care of it and is responsible, and then they could charge residents fees instead of the town. But the town was put in a difficult situation because the developer stopped paying taxes on the stormwater infrastructure and hadn't maintained them. So the county foreclosed on the land and gave it to the town to deal with. There is, of course, a principle in state law that the town cannot use general funds money to support a project that only directly benefits a small number of people. And that's why New York State allows the creation of districts. In conversations with our town attorney, I said, what if we just don't do anything? What if we just let the infrastructure degrade? And the town would then be liable to the DEC and the EPA for pollution of Buttermilk Creek and Cayuga Lake, and also liable for potential damage to the homes that are below the infrastructure. Luckily, most of the homes are above it, but there are 3 homes below it that could be in real danger if maintenance doesn't happen. The other option, as I said, is a homeowners association could maintain it. We could also require each individual homeowner every year to go and hire an engineer to evaluate the impacts of runoff from their property and if it was being fully taken care of. But it makes a lot more sense to approach it as a neighborhood as a whole. So that's the purpose of setting up a district. Again, it doesn't really make sense for the general fund to pay for maintenance of infrastructure that only serves a small group. We have an example of this, which is the West Danby Water District. A certain group of people needed shared infrastructure that affects them, but not the rest of the town. It's something that only exists in that neighborhood. It's not another neighborhood. So the people that are served by it pay for it. That's the basic principle of these districts and why they are set up the way they are. So it's been something that's been a long time coming. I think we've, probably had 20 different newsletters about work on this process. It's been very delayed through many planners. I think it's kind of been on the back burner of figuring out how does this infrastructure get maintained. It's a complicated process. But it is something that has to be dealt with because every year that goes by, that infrastructure degrades further. In a sense, people have saved a lot of money by not paying for it for the last 20 years. That is should be a part of benefiting from this infrastructure. It is cheaper to leave it alone than to do something. We have some back work to clean up from that time, but I'm hopeful that we can get it in good shape and keep it maintained and keep it at an affordable price.
Do you remember offhand the history of communication with the residents in that district about it?
Other than the newsletter, we did last year have a public meeting just for people in that neighborhood that was held at multiple times, recorded, shared with people. I personally went door to door and flyered. Again, it has been a while. That was on our agenda to do last year and it didn't get done. So there has been some time there. As the other folks mentioned, it was written into the paperwork setting up the neighborhood that everyone was supposed to be told when they pulled building permits. You would also know from review of any of the other documents, which we know there's been a lot of review of in the last year. So obviously it sounds, there are always people who it's brand new to. Nobody likes finding out that they're going to have to pay some extra money every year. So that's not surprising.
The initial, it looks like the initial is around $309 a parcel. What about the following years?
I'm trying to remember, it is laid out, but I think we expected it to be around $200 a year. So what is that, less than $20 a month.
And we haven't had any other developments since then?
None of the scale.
Whitehawk? Does Whitehawk have a?
Whitehawk maintains at their own expense all of their own infrastructure.
That was an issue, you may recall, when they redid their.
Yeah.
Bridge, I remember, but
Yeah.
that was so.
So they pay dues to their association. They've spent many thousands of dollars upgrading their culverts, maintaining things
Right.
to stay in compliance with their permit, because the permit that includes the setup of the stormwater system is not you make it and then it's done.
Right.
It has to be maintained
maintained.
constantly. It doesn't. It's not something, it's set it and forget it thing. You
And
have to.
And this development is mainly that it's two retention ponds, right? That,
Two retention
Or
ponds
have-
and
were they ever dug out? Did anybody, has the town done anything at all about digging them out yet?
no, because we need the district to pay for it.
Yeah,
I mean, they were dug out when they were first set up, so.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And the report indicates that, they're not in terrible shape, but, the outlets have degraded,
yeah.
so it needs to be,
yeah, I've seen,
spiffed up so that it doesn't wash away if we get a torrential downpour of it. And the ditches, and the conveyances, some of them, things have grown up in them that you might not want to be there. There was a recommendation regarding leaving some and taking others just to make sure that it still
Right.
functions okay. So, the engineering happened when, in advance of that, the affected neighbors were all, given notice that engineers would be going in and checking it all out.
Right.
And next day we had a meeting about it.
Yeah, I think the town really started working on it in earnest again after
Right.
the situation of the property being foreclosed on.
Right, right.
When was that foreclosure?
Oh, several years ago at this point.
It seems like I heard about this a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if it was 2019 or 2020. I think it was around that time.
Wasn't something earlier? I mean, I remember when I used to come to a lot of meetings. and-
Hold that closer. I think that's why we're
Okay.
static. Yeah,
Um,
there you go.
I remember from coming to meetings some time ago about some of the issues about that development and access here and there.
Oh, yeah, it's been an issue since it had existed long enough to need maintenance. But it's, it is a thing that the town doesn't have a lot of experience dealing with, so I think, was a learning curve for past people in my position and myself as well.
Yeah.
I mean, what the basic problem with this was that, it happened to come in Sue Diener's reign. And towards the end where it was more than she could deal with, so
Yeah.
it didn't get dealt with, and then it was a slow process after her to get it back on
Right.
track.
David, what would happen if everyone who lived there left? So it was all empty houses. Who would be responsible for maintaining it then?
Oh,
The property owner.
The property owners, yeah. It's not about living there, it's about owning.
Well, what if everyone foreclosed? There were no property owners.
Then there wouldn't be any water use or any septic.
Well, like storm runoff, we would still have
Yeah.
storms, we
Yeah.
would still have runoff.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I
like.
guess I don't understand. That's like such an incredible hypothetical. It's hard. Do you mean that the town took possession of all of the homes and properties and it was all town owned? Well, then the town would be the owner and they would be responsible for it if the town owned all of the property.
And then that would come out of the general fund.
If there were one, because if that was empty, the rest of the town probably would be too.
I'm just trying to clarify why in that instance it could come out of the general fund, but not in this instance.
That's the way it was set up initially.
Yeah.
That was the initial purpose. It's just like the West Danby Water District was set up that way as well. That's
This was-
not spread around. the
Yeah,
whole
this was a
town.
new thing, before this, we had other developments, the Old Town Village and Fieldstone Circle.
Fieldstone Circle.
The requirements for stormwater management weren't in existence yet. Any development after those regulations were in place, required, this is required of a developer. This is the only one we've had.
And I'll note, this isn't to maintain the road or the ditches. This is about the pond that are a required part of the infrastructure. So the general fund will pay for the road and the same infrastructure that it pays for in every other part of the town. But this neighborhood has a different kind of infrastructure that it couldn't have been built without. It's a shared amenity that allowed the creation of the neighborhood.
I mean, it could have been. I mean, if we had wanted to, we could have said, oh, in the interest of promoting development, we will do this for you. But that's not what we did.
Well, there's also a constitutionality issue there with gifting.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Because it's a requirement of the developer.
The private developer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is he still alive?
Well,
It's just been one
some of them
problem after
are.
another with this guy.
And it's
I'm
not
so-
just that, White Hawk has the same thing, since it was done recently, and they chose to do it on their own. So this is not the only issue in town.
Right.
There's already a precedent that went for them having their own.
It was certainly never supposed that the town would take on maintenance without setting up a district. The provisions in the agreement were that the developer would maintain it until the town set up a district so that the benefiting properties would pay for it.
I mean, is it possible is there still a homeowners association, or did that sort of go by the wayside? I think it's not really in existence, right?
It is, just.
It is. It is, okay. I mean, okay.
It was
mean, I
essentially
wonder-
set up to ensure that, to ensure that the developer could control what kind of houses got built.
Right, right. And where, right?
Yes, yeah.
Um,
Well, the end where was already predetermined because it was a building envelope.
well,
for
that
each
got
lot.
screwed up too.
Yeah, I know,
I don't know, and maybe it's just pie in the sky, but I'm wondering if we could give the homeowners association a month to look at how much it would cost for them to do it themselves. Pardon? You know, you wouldn't. Okay. It
They
is.
should have a mic.
Yeah, if
Why don't we
we-
give them a mic?
but not that one.
It's just,
Do you have an idea of how much it would cost? I mean,
well,
Yeah,
I
we do
mean,
know, it's in,
I-
it's in the report.
Hey, what you said?
huh?
What you said?
No, I'm talking about what, how much it would cost a homeowners association. They'd have to have an engineer look at the land and.
Well, we've
and
already got a
inspect it.
plan, and all they have to do is implement it.
Yes, I'm not talking about the town, I'm talking about,
I'm saying, we, the town, have already developed a plan and
Yeah.
a projection for what it would cost to do. I mean, maybe they could do it a little, maybe they could do it a little bit cheaper, but they're gonna have to do all the same things, whether they do it or we contract to have it done by somebody.
do they have that information?
Yeah,
It's in the.
it's in a report.
It's all the details are in the report.
Yep,
that's what the report is.
yeah, map, plan, and report.
See, where's the report?
Now that's been a little while, so it was shared with the board last year sometime.
Yeah, it's about 3 or 4 pages. No, it's.
More than that, yeah.
It should have been more than
Yeah.
that. Okay, the engineer report.
Good on you for printing it out, because
So that report is an evaluation of the condition,
Right,
the things that need to be fixed, and estimates of cost for both an initial, bring it up to where it should be, and then ongoing maintenance.
right.
and there was some discussion at the time about how it was gonna get paid and allocated. There was some money still left in escrow,
Yes,
which was devoted to, I forget how I ended up apportioning things, but
I believe, it's been a while since I looked at the numbers, but I believe there's around $8,000 in the escrow that was a point dedicated to doing the initial work to bring the area back up to where it should have been. That and the initial year's fee is what that goes to. Unfortunately, the longer this takes, the more of the escrow we spend on having the engineers
escrow,
re-update the plan. The longer the town engages in this, the more we spend of the escrow on attorney's time and engineer's time and not actually doing the work. Every dollar in the escrow that gets burned is money that has to go to the district instead. That's why we're trying to kind of move this forward efficiently, keep it as low cost as possible.
Okay, at risk of having darts thrown at me, I'm going to say that this isn't the first time this has happened to citizens anywhere in the country or anywhere it's where I grew up, it's where I lived before. It's what happens, and in the amount of money that could be charged or levied or whatever way you want to say it. It's the same thing that happens where I grew up, where then there came a water, a communal well, which all of a sudden, I grew up there. I went there when I was 5. I think that water thing came way later. And then lots more people came and then it became a bigger deal. Just part of the cost of living in a communal situation. And it's, no matter, I lived in Reston, Virginia, there are things that happen, things change, and we all share some of the experiences and how fortunate we are to live in a place where we have this available and not polluted rivers and not, right now, if you go to Buttermilk Park and you see what's come out of Buttermilk Lane, it's unbelievable. And practically the first year I came here, pretty much, there was a water symposium that was arranged. It was fabulous. And I'll never, ever forget hearing the words, what we do in Danby affects. And it goes on and on and on. And I personally, I understand what you're saying, I do. But I'm grateful that I'm able to participate in my own way in each one of them. And I'm not telling you you have to. I'm just saying that I think this is fair.
So we have wandered from hearing from the public into a discussion.
I know.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
And it's on the agenda.
is there any more public
Yeah,
Okay.
comment?
so, I want to make sure we hear from anybody who wants to comment.
Right.
Are there any other clarifying questions?
No.
And that's
that's
why.
great.
There's somebody behind you.
I guess, for me, the issue, I've been very familiar with the change. Affected by a large. What I'm getting at is, I guess I'd like to see the agreement said that clearly that this is what's going to happen. Because everything I've looked at, including the subdivision final approval, says this is going to be illegal. This is up to the town's discretion, and the town, that's the one ultimately was always responsible for owning that land and maintaining it. How it was financed is the issue, but not that the town is going to do it, not that somebody else is going to do it. So if there's an actual agreement that really pins all that down, I very much, appreciate it. You could guide me to this.
Sure, yeah, that was actually appended to maybe the last
meeting's
or
agenda.
the agenda before, the letter outlining that. And also, I will say, it has always been the town's option to take the land, and this is how these kinds of development projects work. The town has the option to take it if it's not being properly maintained, because the maintenance is important beyond just the way it impacts the neighborhood. So the town's ability to take it isn't for fun or because the town wants to have it. It's if the maintenance isn't being done the way it should be, that's the town's last option to make sure that it is. And I think it's important to note that it is our attorney's opinion that it would not be appropriate to pay for a small neighborhood surveying facility like this out of the general fund. And particularly when it's the makeup of this situation. So he also did mention that keeping that in good status is important to the property values of this neighborhood, which are the most expensive homes in the town. And that if that infrastructure was to degrade, it could really hurt the property values in that neighborhood if it was unsafe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if there's no more comments, then we can.
Just one. I understand your point.
Could you use, since you've got the mic, could you use it? Because otherwise they're not hearing.
I understand your point, but sometimes these things just happen. My issue with this is the fact that the town has known about this for a long time, and so we have gone another 4 or 5 years downstream with those costs getting higher and higher and higher. And now we're going to be stuck with that bill that could have been significantly less if the agreement between the town and the developer would have been managed and maintained appropriately.
Well, the problem was the nature of the agreement between the town and the developer, because it said essentially the town will take it over when the place is built out. It's still not built out. Now, that was the problem, and we shouldn't have entered into an agreement because we have the history of it taking a long time for developments to get built out. It probably should have been, well, I mean, the best thing would have been to have it in place up front. We were probably trying to be reasonable and not impose a lot of upfront costs for the developer before they recovered some of their investment by selling some of the lots. We could pile more and more on. I mean, every time we did a development, we added additional requirements. The first development I was involved in, we didn't require a paved road. And then it wasn't, very long after the development was in place and the residents were clamoring to have their road paved. Okay, so the next time around, paved road became a requirement for the developer to put in. It's a huge expense. They had to front the money before they sell any lots, in the process, before they could get going. This was a new requirement when this subdivision was created. And it's a significant additional expense to add the extra infrastructure to handle stormwater. And we were probably being accommodating, saying, we'll take it over when you get the place built out. That was not a good endpoint though, because when you sold your lots, it probably would have been a better thing, because we've got even Fieldstone Circle still not built out. The lots are all sold though. The same thing here. The lots were all sold, but the houses were not built. So it went on for some time, and then Sue passed away. Got put on the back burner. I became aware of it, so we said we really ought to get this straightened out. And we moved to get it straightened out. We commissioned the engineering studies to say what needs to be done to bring it up to snuff. What's it going to cost? What are the ongoing costs of maintenance going to be? And that took place. The next step was, what do we need to do to set up the district? So that charge went to the town attorney this year. He came back with, here's the steps. We've been going through them one by one. Here we are at public hearing, make a determination stage. So, and we'll talk about next step later in the meeting if you'd like to hang around. Robert, is your hand still up from before, or would you like to say something more?
No, I'd like to just add a couple of things. I think that with regards to your comments, Joel, that ultimately if the town has made a bad call with regards to an agreement, the town should bear any resulting costs. You shouldn't be able to pass on the costs of errors made by the town when you have attorneys on staff to residents for poorly written, poorly thought out, poorly planned agreements. And certainly I would also echo comments that were made in the room there, that the town should be liable for the whole cost of bringing existing structures that they own up to required standards, given that you failed to act sooner. You've had plenty of time to act and you didn't do it. And David has admitted as much, that it's been put on the back burner. You said exactly the same yourself, Joel. So given that you haven't been prioritizing this, I think the town should pay for all of the upkeep to bring it up to standard, and then future costs could be borne by the residents. Thank you.
Okay.
That's we need to share responsibility, because, we didn't know about this. And it seems that this development, Beardsley Lane and Loomis, seems to fall through the cracks about a lot of things. And, I feel particularly sensitive to this in light of some of the things that have gone on our road in the past several years. But it seems to me we can make find a compromise. And I think what Rob is suggesting is perfectly. I don't think there's anybody on the block that wouldn't wish to maintain it, but we don't wish to bear the brunt of getting it to its proper place.
The ridiculous thing about this is, and I don't want to quote quite a people and get pissed off for them, but those people on Comfort Road.
It's because you have to practically swallow the mic.
The ridiculous thing about this and this philosophy is there's people on Comfort Road whose properties probably don't impact this at all, and you're gonna put a levy on them. There's at least, I think, 2, maybe 3 properties that come in from Comfort Road, and because they happen to be part of this development, those people are gonna be paying into this thing, and they don't even, their drainage goes to those drains that have just been replaced along Comfort Road. So that, to me, that illustrates the point that, you know, where do you draw the line for storm drainage? Where does it stop? Where does it start?
Well, it was all part of the plan when the subdivision was created.
No. They're getting nothing, they're paying and they're getting nothing.
Well, not sure I'd agree, but
But they're not here, so.
yeah.
They don't.
Okay, I think that's plenty of time enough for that public hearing. So I'd like to close that public hearing and move on to the regular meeting. There are a couple of additions to the agenda. An update on the applicability of disorderly conduct laws of noise, and authorize the signing a contract with Choice Words Ithaca for grant writing services for the housing affordability. And then recently added, quote for upgrading workstations and access points.
It's IT this.
Yeah, the IT thing. So we'll move that, if it's okay with you, to the end of the, want to do it at the end of the business? That's what we've been saying, is add on
Yes.
to the end. Okay. Anything else to add or subtract? Oh,
They're not there. They're not there on the agenda anyway.
yeah, they are.
Not- Oh, geez, when did they get put on?
Didn't it get added yesterday?
No,
No.
they weren't there this morning, and I downloaded the agenda 3 times, and they weren't on any of the 3 times, twice today.
Yeah.
Yeah, move the.
Well, it's the same list that we had last time, except
I'm
that-
sorry, can I request that Leslie use the microphone, please?
Oh, yeah, she doesn't work if you don't turn it on.
I was only able to get through December 21st
Well, that would be a start. And when
well,
Janice checked
no,
the
none of
minutes,
them were positive, so I just assumed.
Yeah.
Just wait and deal with, I'll get through the rest
okay,
the next couple days, but,
you okay with that?
I wouldn't.
I sent in the corrections. I emailed the corrections.
Yeah.
That I had, that I noticed.
Yeah, and I went through the minutes, but I didn't do it till today, so, you know,
Yeah.
there are changes on the, with the tract, but what's linked to the agenda has the changes in it,
Huh?
but you may not have seen them.
Well, I decided not to go to the link on the agenda because I was.
No, I mean, what I'm saying is that the changes that I suggested, which are tracked, will be seen by anyone who clicks the link on the agenda. They can't change it, but they can see what I have suggested changing.
And do we know that those changes will be made?
Well, they will if we approve them. But not until we, you know, they're suggestions until, well, all of our things are suggestions until we.
May I interject for two comments?
Sure.
So the first comment is that Joel, I've already seen some of your corrections and approved them as minor edits. And the second thing is at the last board meeting on what month are we? April 24th, the board decided that they take some time to review the documents in the work drive and then hold a special separate meeting to review and approve the minutes. So when Joel asked me to link the minutes to the agenda, I was surprised because that was what was decided at the last meeting.
That wasn't decided at the last meeting. That was my suggestion.
It was suggested.
Nobody else agreed with me, so it wasn't decided.
You're right.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
correct. I mean, I do remember it being suggested, but I also remember some pushback on the idea.
Yeah, it was not approved.
No comment.
Nobody agreed besides me.
I agree.
Nobody wanted an extra meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
But
I'm, I'm
But you're not
gonna
ready yet.
read the draft minutes with your comments on it, and what comes to my mind is that the writer of the minutes may not want to entertain your changes.
Right, well, that's
So
true.
what
with
am I
any of our-
looking at?
Oh, well, I mean, well, when we come to it, we can ask Janice, are you okay with the changes that we've suggested? And if there's anything that she's not okay with, then we can talk about that.
Okay, all right,
But otherwise, what typically happens is that when I make suggestions, Janice reviews them and she says, okay. And she just changes it. It's just like what I
right,
changed.
but I mean, like what I was looking at today and yesterday, I don't know that there was an okay. So,
That's right.
so I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really know what I'm looking, you know, I'm
But
not
that's
sure.
why I suggested doing it in work drive, so that everybody else could see what you were suggesting and then we could, we would have it.
Well,
That's interesting.
yeah. Well,
No, thought you had it.
we have to stand over there.
So. Something about having.
For some reason. Anyway,
We'll turn them off.
but not now, right? Or is that the upshot? You should keep it on if you're gonna be heard.
Yeah, let me put this thing right near the rest of the way. I can't touch it.
Well, if it's that one, try using this one instead. If this was working okay. Okay, yeah, I get that, yeah. This was okay anyway. This was working okay out in the audience.
See what happens.
Number 6, that's on channel 6, channel.
It was weird.
Oh,
It's done it ever since the beginning.
okay.
Yeah, well, it doesn't change that.
How about this? I didn't hear any.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So, upshot, not now.
Great. That's it. That's my,
So maybe between now and next time, we can get a couple more meetings and we can get the mysterious and uncompleted December 6th minutes
yeah.
and deal with them. If we keep this up, we're going to need another meeting to deal with them.
Did you hit your head? What was that?
Okay, so we'll set them aside yet again. I thought we got rid of the consent agenda. Not supposed to be on there.
Right? It's not.
I thought Janice told me that she changed the template, but it might have been for the Wednesday meeting and not the Tuesday meeting template. Doesn't have the consent agenda item removed yet. She showed me how to do it, but I have to remember. Okay, so, no other additions, right?
No.
Okay. Privilege of the floor. Anyone who'd like to address the board? Ed. Mr. Crane, go ahead.
There we go. There we go. It takes a little while to get unmuted, you know.
Yes,
I have two major items. I'm sure that all of you follow the news closely, and I'm sure you're all aware of the almost daily occurrences of yet another mass shooting in this country. And please do consider my words carefully because I think they're important. You're all aware of the shooting that occurred in Texas recently, where some neighbors complained about noise and were gunned down. Whole house full of people. And I think that you should take that to heart because that is a problem that Danby's a wonderful place. Nobody here would do this, but it could happen, no? I think that at this point, you have to deal with the noise problem and promptly. If you can't deal with it by passing a law, the least you can do is provide a roadmap, a recipe, a menu, basically a step-by-step of what an individual homeowner should do if they have a noise problem. Because going next door to talk to your neighbor, sometimes, obviously, it's a little more dangerous than you expected, than might be expected. My second item, you later on today in the agenda, you have something about Protocol for emails directed to town board. Joel, just raise a hand. Did you receive my email and see it?
When was it? Because I don't recall getting.
This afternoon. So let me just, I submit an email with more than a dozen points ranging from typos to common sense stuff to stuff that I think bears consideration. And the one point that I want to stress right here is that there's a section in there right now which more or less says profanity, defamatory statements, and disrespect are often in the eye of the beholder, or ultimately, if it gets that far, to a court of law. Something that one person might consider perfectly reasonable can be considered unacceptable by another. And historically, I'm not dissing anybody here, but at times town board members in Danby and maybe elsewhere have been somewhat thin-skinned and prone to take offense when none is intended. If communication,
where's this in the? Where is this in the policy?
sorry, I can't hear you, Joel.
I say, where is this in the policy? Where are you referring to in the policy? I don't remember.
That is section 3.1.4. The thing is that if you receive an objectionable communication, the onus is on the author, not on you. And to have the content on the record reflects on the owner, not on you. And I don't see why you should prevent somebody's opinion from going in there. And further, the way that section is worded, it's extremely subjective. Sorry, I can't hear you, Joel.
Like I say, this is not a proposed change in the policy.
This is actually in the policy. You sent it out and I wrote comments on the whole thing, including your changes.
Sure, but I mean, you realize you're commenting on something that's been in place for some time.
I believe I commented on it earlier too, but I'm not sure of that. Let me finish. I'm pretty close to the end. In any case, this particular section runs counter to any concept of open government, freedom, honesty, or anything like that. Because basically it says that one town board member or the clerk can basically censor anything that a town resident, citizen, whatever, correspondent wants to say. Even if you put it and said that it required a vote to suppress it, well, sorry, I'm not meaning to be obnoxious, but this town board very often gives in and votes in unison, even if they don't feel completely comfortable with it. I just think that section should be out of there. And as for the rest of it, so, like I said before, some of it's typos, some of it's common sense, and a few of them are opinion like this. I hope you'll carefully consider those before passing into law, passing a policy which includes misspellings, among other things. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe when we come to it, we can have you tell us where the misspellings are.
Not during a meeting, no.
Maybe.
I heard it.
Yeah.
I don't see Ted Glover.
I don't remember getting it.
I can share it with you if you'd like.
Right. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, let's move on. Any correspondence? Yes?
Nope.
No profanity.
I mean, other than nothing that was intended to be entered into the record of the meeting.
Nope.
Announcements that I'm aware of. Might mention the Taps for America, but that's coming at the end of the month.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say that I saw that thing about the bird thing on Saturday.
Yeah.
That looks pretty good.
And we did get it on the website. Town clerk report, is that, I didn't see it.
I was there this afternoon.
Is it? I guess I didn't sign on by long.
Would you like me to screen share it?
It probably wouldn't take it very long, would it?
No.
You want to hear it? Okay.
All right, 1 second. Screen share. Desktop 3. Got it?
And I got your whole screen, which is a lot more than what you want to share.
Should we just look at it?
That's it.
Looking at the monthly report. Oops. Nope,
Nope,
nope. There. Is that it?
nope.
No? Am I looking at the wrong one?
You have to unshare what you're sharing in order to share what you want to share.
All right,
Pat, do you want
let me
to?
try again.
No.
We could look at the,
I got it. How about that?
there we go. Yep.
You need it to be bigger?
Like a quiet month, right?
Yep.
Except for dog licenses.
Nobody got married,
Nobody got married. Nobody got
nobody
any,
got impounded.
yeah, or had games of chance licenses either. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
And we got Steve's report. That was here.
Yep.
Well in advance. And Steve's here if anybody has any questions.
Was.
Yeah, he's here. And then there's,
Could I ask a question of Steve while we're here?
sure,
Because we did receive communication from someone who requested information on two properties on South Danby Road. And I admit, I don't know the answer to those questions myself. So Steve, I'm wondering if you could fill us in. One was number 2 and one was number 116.
I'm not familiar with those right off the top of my head. I don't know if I saw that request.
Number 2 is the property right at the end of South Danby Road, which has been abandoned for some time and seems to be sort of falling apart in places.
Yes.
So
So there has been some inquiries about that property because it just, to my understanding, was on the auction block. And there were several people interested in buying it to, refurbish it and use it. And I heard various levels of opinions on how good or how bad the structure actually was. I've never been in it, so I don't know.
Okay, so just to clarify, the status is that it's going up for auction? Was up for auction.
Correct. I thought it had been auctioned. I do not know if anyone bought it or not.
Okay, and 116, I actually pass when I come in and out of town, and it does
Yeah.
look like someone is building it at that location.
So the property owner moved their tiny house on wheels from another location in Danby. And he is in the process of building a shed less than 144 square feet. So therefore it does not require a building permit. He does have a well on site. And he currently is using a composting toilet and in the process of figuring out what he wants to do to build a house, which of course will, trigger a septic system and all the things that go along with a building permit. And I will say he's not the neatest person in the world as far as the way he's kept the property at this point. But it is better than it was where it was located prior to South Danby Road.
you mean the tiny house?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, David.
Okay, last month, the planning board met without me because I was on vacation.
Wasn't the same either.
I was literally on Alcatraz Island during the planning board meeting, and I will say it was better. The planning board heard an application, this was the second time before them, from Jeremy Canute, looking at subdivision of 229 East Miller. At that time, I actually spoke with the county planning from Alcatraz Island in advance of that meeting. They exercised more of their allowed time than I expected, and we did not have their 239 letter in time for the meeting. So the project was being reviewed by county planning because it's a subdivision that does not comply with zoning because it had to have a variance for lot size. That triggers their review. They have since then provided a letter of no intermunicipal impacts. So the project is free to go ahead, but they have 30 days to provide those. They're frequently faster. And in this case, they were still significantly faster than 30 days, but I think we only had the full application from the applicant 3 weeks before the meeting. So there wasn't time for a full 30 days, as usually happens. So that can slow down this process. That project will be back before the planning board this month. And they've kind of been through preliminary review already. I don't expect any fireworks or changes there. The BZA reviewed a variance at 1914 Danby Road, applicant Zachary Larkins. This is, you may remember, is the lot where Dollar General was proposed a year or two ago. It's an 8-acre parcel purchased by the applicant, and they are looking to build. They wanted to build on the existing concrete slab on the property where electricity is already run, where there used to be a commercial warehouse of some sort. I believe it was a tractor dealer. That location is not in compliance with the hamlet zoning requirements, which is trying to get buildings to the street and more of a traditional neighborhood format. So they needed a variance from the maximum lot or maximum setback. It's the first time we've dealt with that. It's usually encouraged to make your house as far from the street as possible, but that's not really what we want in the hamlet. So they had to pursue a variance. The variance was granted. They did show that they are working towards a plan that would be more hamlet oriented, even though their initial home will be a home in the middle of 8 acres, which is not very hamlet oriented. They discussed plans for a cafe / bakery that would meet the street and meet the kind of requirements or goals of the town, and also a number of small homes that could fit in the parcel that they are interested in renting out. The neighbors were all quite supportive, and they seem like a great addition to the town. So that went well. Other things that are going on, I expect, I'm kind of surprised we don't have it today, but I know very soon we will have the first set of applications for the housing rehab grant program. Steve and I have both met the gentleman who's doing the actual inspections and initial scoping for those projects. And my understanding is that they have several that are close to being ready to move forward. It's a long process getting started, lots of documents and things like that, but that should be ready to move forward. And we're through all process with the state on that, which is also a big deal. The Safe Streets for All program is moving towards hiring a consultant. That program is headed up by the city of Ithaca, and the town signed on to have a chapter written about safety improvements in the town of Danby. So I'm going to be on the consultant selection committee that should be meeting probably in the next few weeks, and we can get that rolling. We are also, you'll see further on in the agenda, put out an RFQ for the grant writing consultants through the grant that we got from Tompkins County. Joel and I have reviewed those and chose a preferred candidate and have a draft contract. And then we realized that usually I am keen enough to put in the resolution supporting a grant application that the supervisor can take all steps necessary to implement it. This time we said the supervisor can sign the contract with the county, and that's it. So we would like your permission to have the supervisor sign the contract with the consultant to provide the service. What else do I have? I think we can probably leave it there for now. If you have other questions. Oh, we have a few days left on the short-term rental survey. My understanding is you decided to end accepting those on May 10th. Cindy's been working hard on typing those in when we get them in paper. I believe we're over 100 now.
Paper ones?
We might be over 100 just in paper, but they're all into the electronic system now, so they can all be reviewed there. Yeah.
That's a decent response rate anyway.
Right. Yeah. Any questions about anything else going on?
Great. Okay. There will be questions when we get to the South Point development, but. Okay, brings us to the warrants, doesn't it? Are they in order?
Well, I'll move highway fund.
Highway?
Highway vouchers 84 through 91
Yep.
for $50,000, $50,943.11.
Not 57,000?
57,000.
What did I say?
I don't know.
You said 50.
Well, why did I say that?
I don't know.
$57,943.11. I got thrown off by the dollar.
Second,
God, that would have been-
Any discussion? No. Okay, Janice.
Connors,
Yep.
Hunter,
yes.
Weisberg,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes.
Kenyon.
Yes.
Thank you. Where's Laura?
Right here.
Hi, Laura.
How you doing, guys?
How are you doing?
Good.
Except
Much
for
better.
your
She's
problem.
lying. Yeah.
Much better now, thank you.
Laura, did you,
Everybody
I
be
have,
cautious to that neurovirus, that I'll tell you.
oh, boy. Well, I'm sorry you did that.
Okay, it's awful, but that's okay. We're moving.
What you get for living in a household with a small child. The voucher number 146.
Yes,
It looked to me like it was a double bill for the same, even though the invoice had, the two invoices had different dates on them. The service period on both of them was the same.
This is a nice thing, right?
It was NICEAG, the photovoltaic,
Right.
but they both said 2/28 through 3/29, 2023. So I'm reluctant to approve two bills for the same period.
No,
Does-
I had looked those over and I mentioned this, and I sent an email off to Janice with this too, and I know she's done some research on it. I just saw that exact same thing when I was looking it over. So I'll just refer to Janice. I think she's kind of looked it up and figured out what was going on, but that was my main thing too, is that the service period was exactly the same on both of them.
yeah.
Well,
Yes.
she said that she said that it was, but she didn't, I mean, I can't remember exactly what she said in the email, but that it was between you and the board. She wasn't aware of.
But in the meantime, Janice, you made some inquiry, you got some clarification as to was one a Was it a rebilling because of something changed in, that required them to be submitted?
I did not know that that was part of my job duties.
Oh, I thought Laura
They're
just said.
nice bills for the general fund, right? Nice bills and they're for the
Right,
general.
Yeah.
it was 146.
Yeah, so there, a couple of bills, that's why I kind of had mentioned that, for the both of them to be on there. It almost looks to me, I mean, there's a different billing date, like just what? 5 to 10 days between the billing date.
Right,
It
so
almost looked to me like they were making a correction. That maybe it was and they've done this before, a long time ago, I remember in the past, but I haven't processed those bills in a while because I know the town clerk works on those. But I can remember them like having a correction or doing, and if you look in through the bills, you'll see that there's some different credits and some different things there, but the totals are the same. What I'm wondering is, if that second bill is meant to be a replacement of the earlier one, even though it's the same dollar amount. That's kind of what I was thinking, Janice, when I had emailed emailed you about what I saw in there. That's kind of what I thought maybe happened, that they were replacing that.
So as the person who collates and presents the invoices to the board, the reason I said that it wasn't I have nothing to do with it is because I don't cut the checks. I don't approve any of the costs. And I'm not, that's not my role to be fiscally responsible in that capacity. So what I saw was that there were 2 exact bills. They differed in the dates that they were printed. There was no indication on the second dated, the most recent dated invoice, that it was to replace the previous one. The amounts did total the exact same amounts, but the way they got to those amounts were different. There were different credits. One of them showed that there had been no payments received. I think the other one did. So that's why I highlighted that in my email to everybody to say, hey, this is what I've seen. You do with it what you will.
Isn't it for the town? Isn't it for town hall electricity?
I have no idea because I don't understand the difference between the street lighting and the photovoltaic bills.
Actually, in this case, a call to Verizon would have, or NICEAG would have cleared it up. So I think what we should do is just delete the first invoice and pay the second invoice. Just delete the 70542. We're not paying twice.
I agree.
Right. So I'm gonna approve vouchers 144 through 154, minus that first first part of 146, and the total would be then $11,475.15.
Except that, don't we want to add the?
I got 78.
That's because you didn't take off the $3 from 149.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that if you took that off. Okay.
149.
Should have been.
Yeah, she changed it. It was changed.
So if you remove the 70542, it brings you to $11,475.15.
What about the,
Say what I said.
what about the Triple Cities Network, invoice that Catherine raised? As something we ought to pay sooner than later.
I think that should be a separate item. That's not.
Well, it should belong to the general fund warrant if it's.
Is that the one that I forwarded over, Janice? Is that the one they're talking about now?
No, this is a
There's
different.
one on the warrant now.
Different
That,
one?
that was for the contract.
Yeah.
But then there's a separate invoice for the
Computer.
hardware.
No, when did
I sent it to everybody last week. I know when it came.
We've got another invoice too for the first monthly charge, but that it doesn't, I mean, it can be paid and through May.
Mhm.
So,
Send it again today. It went,
Yeah, I do remember Catherine sharing this with us.
425 was the, oh wait, that's not, yeah. I mean, the expiration date on the quote is 5/23, but the thing is that we need to tell them, yes, That's the biggest thing. We need to say yes to this,
Yeah.
so they can
When-
get ordered and put in.
When did you send that
So
out?
that's a separate issue, though. That's not approving payment. That's saying yes to it.
Well,
Yeah, the only way you say yes is to
you
pay.
gotta pay it. You gotta pay for it.
Right,
And it is within the range that we just, that was planned when we took the contract on.
I mean, your
When
computers
did-
look pretty
when did-
pricey for me for what I need, but,
remember when
but
your
that doesn't
email,
mean it's not appropriate.
Well, we
Send it
got
like
one
the next
today.
day.
We got one.
we got one today,
Janice
but that was
sent it.
Janet.
No, I sent
You
one
sent it
and
first.
Janice, and I sent one last week, right after I got it.
Catherine sent
we got it.
on Wednesday, April 26th was your first email.
We gotten it, I mean, Laura, what should Catherine have done with that to have gotten this put on the, general fund?
Give it to Janice, right?
Yeah, that just email it to Janice.
Okay,
Wasn't Janice included?
Yes, I sent
Yes.
it to everybody, Janice, she knew about it too, because we had the meeting, but
Yeah.
it's, if you want to say, I'll take the blame for not doing the right thing, I don't care
it sounds
about
like you
that.
did the
It sounds
right
like
thing.
you did
Maybe
the
we
right
could
thing,
just
but
do a
it's not-
separate.
No,
Yeah,
I mean, I think the question was, Catherine had asked if she could have it authorized and she asked if it needed a resolution. And
Right.
so nobody responded. And I think that's where balls get dropped.
Yeah, I asked that because I said, do we need to do a resolution? The thing is that, and I'm, whatever.
Well, I mean, it's a good question because, it's within the scope of what we expected. Is it, so is it part of what we had contracted for so that we could just say, well, give us the bill and we'll pay it? Or do we need a resolution saying we're willing to spend this money for these things?
It should be just a bill and pay it.
That what everybody else thinks too.
I
What did
mean,
she
we
say?
could do it.
Just a
separate.
bill
I
and
think
pay
it
it.
should be just to go and we pay it. but-
That's what I think too. I mean, it was part of the plan for the whole thing with the
Yes.
hardware was
Yes, right.
approved. The whole contract
Mhm.
with the hardware.
Right, right. So we've already approved it. Now we just have to pay for it. But was that a quote or an actual statement?
It's a quote, but it says that it's ready to be signed. You want to see it?
I saw it. I
What's our
printed
next
it. out.
meeting? What's the date of our
It's not
next
an
meeting?
estimate. It is.
Okay, so exact.
With the quote, right?
Is there an issue with the paying it next meeting?
Probably not, but I need to tell them, we need to have something that says yes.
Well,
Right,
I mean,
So here's the thing.
I'll
This
just
is-
sign on the
this
dotted
is a-
line.
This is a quote, it's not an invoice. So you approve the quote, that gets sent back to Drew, then they produce the equipment and give us an invoice, that then goes to me and I put it on the warrants.
Thank you.
It is a
That was
two-step
clear.
process.
Thank you, right, so it just needs to be signed.
Right, so
Okay.
authorization to sign makes sense. Not in conjunction with approving the warrant, but we
Right, so
should
we
make a
can-
point of doing that.
Okay, so we vote, did somebody second?
Second?
Yeah.
Woodward second.
Warrants, right?
Right.
Wait, are we seconding approving?
The
that?
warrant, the
No.
warrant.
No, we're
Got it.
doing the warrant.
We're in the midst of doing it.
Going back.
Any further, do we get it all, we get the $3 taken care of as well as?
Yeah,
yeah.
Take out the five.
$3 was taken off of
Okay.
49.
So we're now ready, right?
Yep.
Okay, Janice,
Connors,
Yep,
Hunter,
Yes,
Weisberg,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes,
Gagnon.
yes. All right, brings us to business. Was it two or three meetings ago, we talked about whether we wanted to consider going from elected to appointed on the town clerk, whether to propose that or not. My sense at the time was that I should go ahead and have Guy draft, local law to do it. I did, but when I put it on last time, we said, well, let's talk about it next time. And I got a sense that there was less enthusiasm for it since it was first proposed. I think probably in light of how it went so swimmingly when we had the noise
could be. Oh.
forum.
Yeah, I mean, it's an effort that is often not appreciated by a lot of people. So you hate to add too many of those on top of each other.
Better to wait for it till later, especially during the middle of the election season.
I mean, we don't, there's not even enough time to get it on.
Oh, yeah, it's plenty of time.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it had
That's
to
why,
be-
I mean, I raised the question when I raised the question, if we want to do it, we have until, I think it's maybe as late as, they have to have it, we had to have passed it before the August deadline for putting things on the ballot
Really?
for November. Which means that backs you up to like July or something. So we actually have until July to actually pass that if we want to do it. And I think it might even have to back up 30 days from there, which would put you in June, because of there's a 30-day window for a petition to submit it to permissive referendum.
Right.
And you'd have to have the results of that in time to then put it on the ballot in
Right.
November. So there's plenty of time, but it's if we want to do it. So, but we'd have to decide, we can't wait 3 more months and then decide we want to do it. We'd have to pretty much decide now that we want to do it, and then, we pass it. There's a 30-day window for a petition of, I forget what percentage of the voters who want to put it on the ballot, because it's subject to permissive referendum. If you get that petition with that number of signatures, then it goes on the ballot in November for the voters to decide. And if you don't, then it becomes the law. That is,
I mean, it doesn't, I mean, besides Guy's fee,
Yeah.
it doesn't cost us anything, right? I mean.
well, not if it goes on the ballot in November.
Right.
Right, no, then it would, we have the public hearings, minor cost to have, pay for the
Public, yeah,
the,
notification.
notice of public hearing, but otherwise than that,
I mean, I would at some point like to do, I would be in favor of trying to get, find out whether or not
the voters are willing to
people
support
would,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it comes to a strategic
it's
question
sort
of
of-
whether or not is now the right time to propose it.
I don't think now is a good time to propose it at all. It makes more sense to do it next year after the local elections are done.
Well, it's a debatable point, because, if it
Especially
happens-
after the noise
yeah,
debacle.
right. But I mean, if we put it on next year, it's going to look like we're trying to knock off whoever gets elected in November.
Oh, Jesus.
No
On it.
matter when we do it, people will
No.
have opinions about it. I mean, that's.
I mean,
that's
the
just-
other, the flip side is that it is a vote. I mean, it's, people get to vote on it. It's not something, that the town board would be, doing.
Yeah.
People would be voting on it. So,
I guess the question is, if I were a resident, and this was going to be proposed, I would ask, why now? And we should probably ask ourselves the same question, why now? Or why not now? I mean, what would be a good time to do it? If,
well, why don't we, why just the town clerk? I mean, why not town clerk and highway superintendent?
didn't
Right,
we-
both of them make sense, and they can make
They
bigger
do.
arguments for both.
Yeah, you can.
Can't go one for the other. I would do both at the same time, but I would do neither one right now.
We didn't we ask, what the voters asked once before, whether they wanted to do the highway superintendent?
Twice, I think, yeah.
And twice.
And they said no.
Once it lost by like 1 vote.
It was close, it was close the
Three.
second
I think it
time.
was 3 votes.
Yeah.
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 Um,
Are they, that says 3 times. Anyway, it's been asked, that's been asked before. I don't believe the clerk has been asked.
No, because we were, I mean, people thought that it would be, you could do the highway superintendent first and then the town clerk.
Yeah,
But it maybe makes sense to do them both
they
at the
could
same
be,
time.
well, of course, there wouldn't be necessarily one piece of legislation making both of them appointed instead of elected. Could be 2 separate proposals.
Yeah. Well, I assume that's what it would have to be.
I don't know whether, that's a question for
Maybe
Guy,
not.
whether it could be,
To be on the same.
Yeah, it makes more sense to do separate.
Well, I mean,
Why,
it'd be
I
on
have
the same ballot. but it
Same
would be
ballot.
separate.
separate questions, whether,
But the proposal to do it would be.
all at the same time, yes, yeah.
The same
Yeah.
day. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm less sensitive to sentiment
We know.
than you are, so
Yeah,
that,
we know, obviously.
I
That's,
count.
that's obvious.
Yes, exactly. So I'm a poor judge of whether now is the best time, in other words.
I don't know. I think it's sometimes, it's always good to ask people their opinions and it's a opportunity for people to vote on something. I don't,
Yeah, and if it were proposed, then there would be a public hearing, another chance for people to say what they think. Is that what you?
Well, there would be, yes. I
Right.
mean, if
Before we-
we want to go ahead with this, we've got it in hand. I mean, we had it, it's already worked up. It was on the agenda last time, so people can see,
right.
the local law to basically, it's pretty simple, because all it does is just says, from elected to appointed. But we could have a we would have to have a public hearing if we want to, go ahead with it. And then there would be that opportunity to comment on it before we act on it. Then, based on that, we could decide whether or not we want to act on it. If we then pass it, there's then the opportunity for people to say, wait a minute, we want to weigh in on this, and submit a petition to have it go to the voters. If for some reason everybody thought it was a great idea and nobody objected, then our action would suffice. In other words, if nobody objects and submits a petition within that 30-day window, it doesn't go to referendum. It's a permissive, not a mandatory. I think it's permissive. I
didn't think so.
Not absolutely sure about that, come to think of it.
I thought it had to go the ballot.
Now that you mention it, I think you may be right.
It's just a resolution.
Yeah,
It's
in which
passing
case,
law.
in which
We have to
case,
pass a law, and that's a mandatory.
I think you may be right. It's a mandatory referendum. There's two kinds, permissive and mandatory.
Yeah, but I think we have to.
I
pass
think
a
this one
law
is a,
To have
yes,
the elected positions changed to an appointed.
yeah. That part's clear. You have to pass a law. What's not clear is whether or not, as a result, it mandatorily goes to referendum in a sense or not.
Do you want me to show you? It's, I was
It's
just reading.
I'm sure it's in the law,
It's
which
the
tells you
permissive-
that you can
the
do it at all.
permissive is only if you've passed a resolution. If you pass a if it's spurred on by a resolution, it can be a permissive. But if it's a law, it's mandatory. I know I have it here somewhere. What'd you do with it?
I don't think that's true, but it might be.
Oh, I put it back.
Yeah.
in a folder.
Well, at any rate, one way or the other.
Resolution of Towns had an article about it.
Yeah. The question still arises. Well, I suppose it might influence your thinking whether or not, if it's permissive referendum, whether you would want to do it as opposed to if it's mandatory. But either way, if we were going to propose it, we would have to act on a local law, because that's what Guy wrote up to make it happen. And I don't remember, because it's been a month, but we could look at the last month's stuff. Janice, could you look back
Go back
that-
to,
to that law that's attached to the agenda for last time, to see whether I don't recall whether it says anything about referendum being permissive or mandatory.
no.
Oh, you probably printed it out, right?
I did. I'm here. You know where to look in it here.
This local law shall be subject to a mandatory referendum at the general election to be held on November 7th. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Yes.
Section 4.
I have up the list of local laws subject to mandatory referendum. And one of them is abolishing an elective office.
Okay, so there you go. So that's mandatory. All right, so mandatory referendum, if we go ahead.
Well, personally, I would be interested in hearing public comment.
Which if we, are willing to entertain it, we would get as a result of the public hearing. I think we've got time that we could, so we just missed the opportunity to put it in the newsletter.
Correct.
We would put it, we could still put it in for the June issue. And have the public hearing at the, see, when is the first? It's not till the 6th, so that's late enough. People would see it a week ahead of time. If we want to do that.
I think that if we were to do this, we should do both elected, not pick and choose.
Yeah,
Yeah, both elected versus both, or,
both appointed.
yeah.
I would actually be opposed to appointed unless so we have more details in there, including setting up a committee in both cases that consists of people independent of the town board.
For what purpose?
To a point.
That's for the appointment. I'm saying that,
No, I'm talking about when we talk about an open hearing, I would not want to say that the town board appoints. I wouldn't want to say that the town board appoints, but there would be a committee that consists of other people besides just town board members that would
you're
evaluate the thing and recommend
you're
to
talking
the
about an
town board.
appointment
You're talking
procedure.
about how the
Exact-
appointment gets made.
Exactly, but
Yeah.
yeah, and I would consider it together, because exactly like the school district does for principals, the school board makes the decision, but there is a broad-based committee that looks over the that looks over the resumes, gets evaluations, discusses it in detail, and makes a recommendation to the board. The
Well, I
board does not have to follow the committees, but to the best of my knowledge, they always do. And it makes it a lot stronger position in getting the board only involved.
I think, I mean, I'd like to look at, I mean, it may be a moot point, but, I'd like to look at how other towns do it, you know, how other towns appoint highway superintendent or I mean, we also need to look at if is that civil service? I mean, we want to look at that too. I mean, what are the, I mean, maybe Laura could help us out with that. What are the ramifications of having to have not just appointed, but if it's civil service, that takes a lot of, you know, that takes a lot of decision-making away from,
Yes, and it's not,
Away from
it's not
people.
what we call it a
and,
discretionary
No, and,
employee.
you know, I want to look at that a little more because myself, I mean, maybe I'd rather have an elected than a civil service, you know, having to take people off a list. So, I don't know.
Well,
I'll
civil
go up
service or not, does that apply equally to whether it's appointed or elected?
No.
No. No.
I know that there are some positions that are up there for the two positions you're talking about. And they have certain minimum qualifications that are in them. I can't remember if they're competitive or not. I don't believe that they are. I think
Oh, okay.
but I'm not totally sure about that. Let me go up, I'll look them up and
Yeah, we can find out.
email them to you. I'll send you the links and send you so that you can look at those positions.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay. So that sounds like we want more information before we
Yeah.
decide.
Yeah,
Do we have time to gather more
I
information?
think so.
I think we could probably have time to get that information and make the decision at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hmm.
I can get the civil service information for you at least. You know,
Thanks.
from the end, so you can see what's involved with that.
Okay, so the questions relate to, is it a civil service position? Is that the only question?
I think so.
Pretty much, I think.
Well, then, if they're both to be considered, one of them had a residency issue. Do they both?
Well, I did get the answer to that.
Yeah.
Well, to hold an official position, which the clerk is, you have to be a resident. So it doesn't matter whether you're elected or appointed.
Oh, okay.
Also relevant.
Yeah.
So we'll bring that up again next time. Once we know. Yeah, I see Dan Hoffman here. Did we act on his easement last time?
And the Hoffman
The
one. on
Hoffman
Bruce Hill.
Carlson easement.
I don't have my, oh,
Remember what,
You scheduled a public hearing to be held on May 17th.
17th of May. Okay, so that's where we are on that one. That's why I didn't put it on.
Right.
So Dan, we'll be dealing with it next time,
May 17th,
May 17th.
May 17th at 6 PM.
Yeah. It's been shared and we're poised. Transfer development rights. This came up because of the Cuba, what do they call themselves? Cuba International? The farm on Hornbrook and Nelson, that where they may ask us to do a planned development. They got 14 acres. They want to do 4 units, which is way more than what the zoning allows. So looking at a similar situation to what we're looking at with Tomo Shibata, in my mind. But if we had transfer development, which was supposed to be a component, then, it would allow for the possibility of buying development rights from elsewhere and transferring them to that property in order to enable the 4 dwellings that they want, thereby protecting 40 acres elsewhere. But we don't have it in place. So we set this aside when we passed the zoning revision because it was going to take a substantial investment of time and effort in order to bring it to the point where it could be considered.
Yeah.
Because it requires a generic environmental impact statement associated with it. And that's not trivial undertaking. So the question is, when are we going to do this? If we're going to do it. It was a component that some people thought was important, and other people thought was not. So, it's not like we were of one mind on it by any means.
So you're saying
don't
that
know.
the zoning didn't have this in it?
As we passed it, we didn't have that component.
Right.
It was part of the proposal, but it was pulled out
Right.
in order to get it passed timely. Otherwise, it would have been another 6
I mean,
months or more.
I think we have a lot of other things going on right now that looking at short-term rental and, I'd rather that the next thing we do is something along the lines of site plan review for ag development. That has been one of those low-hanging fruits that have been dangling for a long time. The transfer of development rights, I guess it'd be a fun conversation to have to really think about. Lots of people think it's a good idea. I'm not sure, but if you're bringing it up because of this situation, the specific situation, I think of
What it did
transfer,
was it precipitated my saying,
yeah,
well, you know what, we said we're going to come back to this and we haven't come back to it. And
right,
shouldn't we come back to it? And if not, well, if not, why not? And if so, when?
Okay, so you're not thinking about it with,
Well, I don't know that we could bring it off in a way that's going to affect this
no,
proposal anyway.
but my point is that I thought that the transfer of development rights, I would like, if we had something like that, we'd be wanting to transfer the development rights to an area that we want to see development in. Not to another, area where we don't want to see development. So that's just my 2 cents. But
Yeah.
I think.
But you recall, we had a lot of discussion about this, but back in the planning stage, where we talked about, from where to where,
Yeah.
and the sense was that, and that, this is what I couldn't remember, but David refreshed my memory. The R1 is the where we least want, right? Except for the state forest, I forget what that one was being called, whatever.
Right.
Anyway, R1 you could transfer out of, but you couldn't transfer into.
Right.
But R2 you could transfer into from out of R1. And then and then in R2 you could also transfer out into our,
Right. But I mean, I don't think it's, you just say that generically, you need to look at the specific places and.
And that's what I originally proposed, that the rights had to come within had to be, the transfers had to happen within a half a mile. So that the benefit as well as the benefit and the
Half a
impact would
mile.
be in the same neighborhood, so to speak.
It's not very, yeah. Well, I don't know.
Maybe not half a mile, but what we ended up with was nothing like that. It was like, it could come from, South Danby and get in land and, somewhere in the North Country, so to
Right.
speak.
Well, unless
Because
somebody
it wasn't linked.
feels like it's, something we need to deal with right now on top of everything else, and I would just wait a little while. I'm not,
I mean, does it make sense to wait until we see the results from the survey? Because it seems like that might,
Doesn't have anything to do.
I wouldn't
with
think
the
it'd have
survey.
much relevance, but
No, it doesn't have anything to do with the survey.
yeah. I just feel like there's a lot of stuff with the housing, there's a lot of stuff with,
yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
yeah, I
Mhm.
think, and I know that sometimes things don't get dealt with because there's always a lot of stuff, but, it's not the first thing I would want to attack. I mean, we've had serious concerns about the ag development and, I remember, CJ really before she left, I mean, it's been an issue a number of times where we wished we had something in place.
You talk about the site plan review?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe that's easier, it's probably an easier thing to deal with than transfer of development rights, but.
Don't both of these go to the planning board to start with?
No,
Yeah.
they can go to the planning board if we want to send them to the planning board, but, they came out of the planning group.
Yeah.
And the planning is our bailiwick. So I mean, how we handle it's up to us. We could delegate some or all this stuff to the planning board if we want to. And we did agree last time that we would send the short-term rental, to them. Well, they want to see the results of the survey to see to what degree they would like to be involved in the whole short-term rental issue. So we agreed to share the results with them and let them weigh in on how they like to participate. But and we could do that, if I think.
It provides another set of people looking at it that have some experience in this field, so it makes sense to have them look at first and then provide input to us.
Which thing are you talking about, Pat?
We're
Short?
talking about anything.
I mean, I don't think they all fit together.
Both the
Well,
ag
that's-
things and this thing here.
Yeah, that's why I asked that, because I'm not so sure they all fit together, but
They don't fit together, but they're both things that involve planning. which
all-
means they
they're all
could go to the
fine.
planning board.
Well, we
Right,
can
but I
argue,
don't
we
think-
can argue about it.
I think that other people may have expertise in one area and not in the other.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I mean.
yeah.
And I'm not.
But
so
I
sure
just
planning
think
board.
not, my suggestion would be to wait on the transfer development. You know, revisit, you know, bring it back up in 6 months.
Okay, here's 6 months. What do you think?
Well, I was curious about why Steve mentioned it. Were you thinking about it in relation to the short-term rental? Because you were thinking of why people might want.
I guess in my mind, it's just this idea of development. And I mean, I am not well about this, but my concern is that it seems like it's sort of doing an.
Sorry, but your mic isn't working.
It seems like it's.
In a way, potentially doing an end run around zoning, if I understand it correctly.
Not, well, not
This
really.
changes, this is part of the zoning,
It was part of the zoning
it's-
proposal.
It is.
and it was taken out because it would slow down the whole process. And
Right,
now that
I
we've done it here,
understand.
So it is part of zoning.
Well, the issue is part of zoning.
What
You're
it
right,
was,
but-
You're right.
what it was, Steve, was a way to, it was one other thing that could be done besides conservation easements that would reduce the density further in the parts of the town where you don't want development to happen, is to allow some of the development rights to be transferred from those places to places where you're more willing to tolerate them being used. Other than the hamlet centers, because we already made it really easy to develop in the hamlet. There's no need to buy development rights in many places. You can develop it, whatever density you can get approved, basically. There's no minimum lot size. You can have quite a few units without having to do anything special. But outside of that, forget what that other, the next group where we, the pink zones, what do we call them?
The Hamlet neighborhood?
Not the Hammond neighborhood, there was low density residential, yeah, it was the one thing that remained. So low density residential were the areas that have already been developed at suburban density, essentially. Where it would be okay to move some development rights, we thought, to those areas in the interest of preserving more of the R1 and R2. And
David, when do you think we should attack the transfer of development rights?
This week?
You're hilarious. I guess Joel and I talked about this a little bit, and well, first of all, there's two things that I'd like to point out first. One, I just want to clarify that the comparison between Uthuru Farms and Tomo's proposal, Tomo's lot was 2 acres, looking for 4.
It was different.
Yeah,
It was different
in a bunch of ways.
in a bunch of different ways. And,
So I just want to make sure those are
well,
very different things, although both things
Well-
asking the town board to allow more density than the
Right,
zoning
right.
allows. So that's one. The second was, there were 2 reasons that it was put off. One was this need for a generic environmental impact statement, which is a huge lift, and will require kinds of analysis that I'm not comfortable I can do without us being committed to spending money on help in that. The kinds of analysis required really depends on the scoping process and what things people bring up, but there's several things that I can think of that people would bring up that would require a substantial lift. So in addition to that kind of technical part, it was also the part of the zoning that the most people were unsure about, I think. So it was a discussion that we could have later. I think it's worth talking about for the board, when it's a priority or how high on the list of priorities it is. But what I have asked is that if it is something that you want to do to add to workload this year, it would require a commitment to investing additional money because it's just not possible that I could
Yeah,
get it done in a short time frame by myself.
at least 6 months.
So maybe we should table it for now.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's my,
so the answer to that
Money.
question that's raised
Money.
is no, it's not a priority.
well,
We could look at it in the context of the goal setting, but,
I guess we're.
yeah.
figuring out.
All right, which brings us to the drainage district next step. The guy has drafted a next step resolution, which I don't remember if I printed it out or not.
I'd really, suggest that whenever anybody does something like this, somewhere in there is like a date of when it got done, like at the top or the bottom or something, just so that,
Mm-hmm,
you know, I've got multiple copies of something similar,
mm-hmm.
but,
Well, it can't be too much of this one because it only just appeared last time.
yeah, I've got,
Yeah.
I've got another one, resolution number 23.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, 23 dash, fill in the blank.
right.
Yeah.
But it's not the first one I've gotten. So, I mean,
Well, anyway, this one, which is what got identified as next step, would have us actually approving the formation of the drainage district. And then that starts the clock on the possibility of objecting.
So if that happens, then there is a public hearing about this as well.
This was the public hearing tonight.
That was it.
yeah,
So the next step after this,
Well, if we pass this resolution, it establishes the district.
right?
It doesn't go into effect right away because there's a window wherein there could be objections raised. If there's enough objections raised, it has to go to referendum,
missive referendum.
permissive referendum, which is why
Which is
it's a
weird.
petition.
It's just so weird,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's not clear who the referendum is with. Do we have an answer to that question?
Yes.
The residents?
Just the residents in the,
The residents who were on the last one. So if they're new and weren't on the last one.
oh, residents of the whole town
No,
The district.
of the district.
who voted at the last election for the governor.
Yes.
That's what I read.
Wait, you're saying there needs to be a referendum
I don't know, 5%.
and that the people who would
number.
vote in that referendum would be the people.
In the proposed district.
And how do you think they're gonna vote on the referendum?
Right.
I have a hunch.
I feel like I'm missing something.
Yeah. That's just so funny. It was 5% of number of votes cast for the governor at the last election. That permissive stuff is bizarre. Anyway. I mean. So if they, what happens? If they
Well, that's a good
vote
question.
no? What if they vote
Um,
no?
I asked the same question this afternoon. Maybe you want to address that?
So a permissive referendum doesn't mean there's necessarily a referendum. There's only a referendum if there's a petition that
Right,
requires a referendum.
Right.
So if you pass this, the waiting period expires, then you file with the comptroller, and then there's one more step, and then it's a district
Right.
that has taxing authority. If there's a referendum and they vote no, there's no district. according to Guy, we still have to uphold the stormwater requirements, and we could do so by requiring each individual resident to hire an engineer and draft a report annually as to the compliance of the stormwater requirements.
So that's all stuff we'd need to make sure was real clear. You know, before people vote.
If we're,
Or
we're-
vote on the petition.
if there's a petition.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Right. Is there any way, I know in the past, it was probably 2 years ago, it was talked about, is there any way to, I mean, seeing as it's been like almost 20 years, is there any way to like phase it in? I know it's only $309. Is there any way to
Compared to,
phase
like-
it in over 2 years? Where,
So the problem, I heard what people said, and I can understand the concept of thinking we should only pay the annual maintenance fee. It's not fair to pay anything else.
no, I don't think. no,
That was one.
That's one of the things they said, yes.
That's one thing that-
Oh, I know, that's not what I was responding
Okay.
to. Go ahead.
The difference between the two, the first year is very marginally more expensive than
Right.
following years. All years are actually, you know, this is an estimate. It's going to be based on the actual costs
Right,
after the
right.
work is bid out. The problem with making a change at this point, it's part of the map plan and report. So to change which we drafted and requested feedback on and, you know, had discussions about
Right.
in the past, that would have been the time that we could have changed that. Now, if we change it, it means we go back to the engineers and pay them to recalculate and adjust the report. And we start at the report acceptance stage again. And the cost of that, we would already be out of the escrow that's paying for a big chunk of this. So in actuality, most of the upfront work is being paid for out of the escrow. But every time we go back and have to work with more professionals, we're eating away from the escrow, which is what's keeping the upfront costs low.
The only reason why I mention it, because it was something people mentioned 2 years ago,
Yeah.
was, you know, don't hit us with a big bill to begin with, just, you know.
Which is why we
let's
decided to do
for
what we
2
did.
years,
Yeah.
get the initial, I
Yeah.
mean, how long is it gonna take to?
But
We're
again,
not
it's
gonna
from
go in there and
$200
finish. I'm-
to $300.
Yeah. It's $309, and some of it's just a principle, you know, it's not, you know, it's, I'm not thinking that it shouldn't be done, I'm just
Yeah.
thinking this was one option they had brought up
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Essentially, we did that. I mean, we applied what we could of the escrow to fixing what needs fixing rather than having that distributed.
So what got fixed?
Well, it hasn't happened yet, but I mean, but it's part of the plan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, was to use what there was to
Huh.
take as much of the cost away, and so that it was an accommodation, I remember exactly.
That was part of the way it's set up. Yes, is that we're using the escrow. Again, I am trying to minimize legal costs, and I think, to be totally honest, we haven't charged all of the legal costs to the district that probably
Yeah.
have been related. Because we're trying to keep it as small of a first year as possible.
Right,
I think it's important to make that very clear too.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to move this and then have more discussion if that's what we want.
I'll second that.
I'll second it.
I second that.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear it.
I second
Yeah,
it.
all right, so it's been moved and seconded, and now we're talking about it.
It seems to me, since I already was unpopular about it, I'll be unpopular still. I think these are things that people get mad about for a while, and then it's something that makes sense and we move on. It's part of what happens all over the place. I think for them, when I first heard it, I was thinking that there was some huge amount of money like flood insurance. coming to some other people who
Yeah,
live
that's
here in
true.
Danby.
This is peanuts by
It's significant,
comparison.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think that the result is something that's good for the greater good thing, including for the people who live there. That's my feeling. I could be wrong, but that's my opinion.
You know, I think that it's unfortunate that this didn't get worked out the way it should have.
Yeah.
But the setup wasn't very good in the first place.
Right.
Having the trigger be when the place gets built out, because it's still not built out. You know, meanwhile, the developer's long gone. You know, because 20 years later,
Right.
still not built out. So that was the wrong trigger to have in there in the first place.
Is that something that can be,
Well,
for
we're
future
dealing with it now.
developments, that we
Yeah.
don't let these things? Yeah, if we ever get another one, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, there were, this isn't happening, developments aren't happening much.
Well, if we had the little cluster housing in the hamlet, we might have little ones. And it could be the same thing, small, don't let this, everybody look at everything up front before you do this.
Yeah. What triggers the need for it? The
The-
number of lots?
It's
or
the
acreage?
amount of new impervious surface.
Okay.
So if you had a green driveway or a green street,
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
you might not have to do it.
Sure, or it would affect the sizing, if there was half the
If you had
impervious
just tree
surface.
houses, you wouldn't have.
If we
to
do, a tiny house development is gonna have less of an impact than,
Maybe, yeah.
than this neighborhood.
Especially if they were up on wheels.
Yes, right.
If you keep
No,
things
they're
forested instead of having lawns, if you,
Yeah.
there's a lot of, even though that's difficult during construction, I will say.
Yes.
I think it's very important that we include the fact that, one of the arguments is that a lot of the upfront, they shouldn't be paying a lot of the upfront costs, but if we're using the escrow, then we are already doing that. We are trying to eliminate, delete, minimize
Minimize.
the upfront costs.
Right.
I'd
And it
rather
sounds like
do it.
we're minimizing it quite well, actually.
I'd rather have it done that way than have me find out after 2 more years or whatever that now more escrow is gone and the problem's still the same. And besides that, I'm gonna have to pay for it just by myself for my house, which could be way more than your house or way less than, whatever. You could pay more and I'd be happy, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think that probably wouldn't be, people wouldn't like that either.
I mean, chances are that, but the on-site for any one of these lots is probably smaller than the cost of dealing with the fact that the main expense is maintaining the retention ponds.
What did you just say?
The main expense, well, I mean, you do have mowing of the ways, but the main expense is associated with maintaining those detention
Oh.
ponds.
You mean, yeah.
Right, and that wouldn't fall in any one of the lots, right?
You mean they
Well,
just
What do you
wouldn't.
mean?
If the district were not formed,
Oh,
we own those parts, we own the detention ponds.
right, right.
So,
That's town property.
so why do we think that this is not going to get voted down in the referendum then?
Because it's the right thing.
So, well,
If the town is gonna end up having to maintain the ponds, right, if it gets voted down. I'm just trying to
yeah,
think this through, if I'm one of those people.
So if it gets voted down,
Like I want,
each individual property owner would have to pay for an engineer's report annually.
but they would only have to pay for the maintenance of their
well, the engineer.
property's portion of it.
The engineering report probably costs more than the.
Right, they
minimum.
can't be in compliance without the ponds. So they would be out of compliance and fined annually if the ponds weren't maintained. So then they would need to make a deal with the town
Right,
to have an easement to maintain the ponds. It would be a lot more complicated and more expensive for the property owners.
Well, I agree with Pat, then that would have to be
Explain
well
carefully.
explained.
yeah, that's,
Yes.
Because I can easily see a
Yeah.
knee-jerk reaction. Do I want this or not? Well, I
Yeah.
think if I don't have it, I don't have to pay anything, so I don't want it.
right. I mean, I think, so long as we, put together the state, reg somehow.
Right.
And make sure that people are aware of the requirements, and even if if the town doesn't do it, who's gonna do it, who's gonna have to do it.
I mean, it comes down to, I mean, what I was hearing was, well, it should have been done. It should have been, we should have been paying into it. Didn't happen like it was supposed to. And now we have a choice about whether or not we want to have it happen at all. And why should we? And why shouldn't we let the town take care of it? Because after all, the town does everything, all the rest of it, But this infrastructure is different than any other development and any other place in the town, because they didn't have this stormwater management law in place at the time that this subdivision was created.
Right.
And any subsequent ones are subject to that same law. So they're not being treated any different than anybody else would be who proposes to do a subdivision going forward. In fact, if I were going to propose a development going forward, and we didn't follow through on this one, I would say, well, how come you let them get away with it, and we're going to have to comply?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's all true.
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah.
I mean, I am sympathetic, however, to people who buy a house
Yeah.
and have no inkling that they're going to accrue this additional
Yeah.
expense. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
saying that
understand.
that legitimizes the position. but
Yeah, and I don't understand why they didn't know.
And there's no cap on it either. What if down the road, climate change, more storms, there's another report, and suddenly we decide we need to add 2 more ponds
Yeah.
at great expense, that they need to bear the cost of? Right?
That's what happened to Whitehawk. They paid for it. They doubled the size of their culvert when the county found that they were not complying with the performance characteristics of
I
protecting
don't know.
stormwater.
I mean, I think that it's something we need to do, and if we don't do it, then they're in a worse position
That's what, yeah.
financially and every other way. But I would also like to sympathize with the neighborhood, given some of the, and maybe it's because of the developer and how he did things, and some of it, the town code or whoever was in charge, but houses have been built where they shouldn't have been built. Things have happened to that neighborhood that they're not happy about. So here's just another one. And I heard that a little bit, like what's next?
Right.
After this,
Yeah,
what are we gonna get?
unfortunate.
So I want to just be sympathetic towards the neighborhood. I mean, you can look at Fieldstone Circle. They should have had a water district. They've had so much water problem. I mean, over the years.
Well,
but,
so too, same thing with Old Town Village.
and somebody did put on a pond, but it overflows.
But that's why the state
but-
changed the laws, because it was
I
clear
know,
from things that
it's,
got done.
the
that-
laws are laws, but I'm just saying I would like the town to be a little sympathetic towards this neighborhood that who feels like they've dealt with things.
Why do you think we're not sympathetic? You think I'm not sympathetic? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah,
But
I do.
But I
it's
am
all right.
sympathetic.
Okay, well,
But
I just want to say it.
to say that they would be worse for them otherwise. That's what I think is important, financially worse.
It's just tone sometimes.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Just tone. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the issue is that I definitely am sympathetic. I mean, I've had plenty of things happen to me that I wish didn't. That it is a situation, but it's even worse if we let it go
Yeah.
again.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
right now, then there won't be the opportunity for
Well, I think we need.
more money will be
yeah,
gone.
We
right?
need to make it clear about what, if it gets voted down, what happens.
Mhm.
Could we,
So-
I would like it if, in an explanation, run it by the dumb ones. Did this make sense to you, Catherine? Will you be my Napoleon's lieutenant? Because I think that's the kind of thing, and some of us will see it, and I think pros,
Yeah.
it gets lost.
Yeah.
Listing, there are lots of ways to let people know,
Yeah.
but I mean, I feel bad for lots of things that happen all around us. I
Yeah.
mean, the same thing happens if I buy a house and I don't know that in 2 years, I'm gonna have to put a new septic system in it. I mean, that's a lot of money too, and that's,
True.
you know,
I don't understand how they could not have known about this.
I remember.
Shouldn't have been,
hearing
wasn't it, isn't this something that should have been revealed when somebody purchased the property?
Yes,
Should have.
and everyone was notified over multiple times over the past few
Yeah, it was
years.
2 years ago.
Not in the
with
last
me-
few
meetings,
months.
and
Yeah,
They probably just.
and there
knew it was
is,
gonna happen.
there is a new resident who
Yeah.
may not have, I mean, they should have known in the review of documents about the neighborhood, but it's possible that they didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, going forward, how would you know?
Well, if they had an association, that would be helpful. I mean,
Yeah, but I mean, this is the sort of thing that
that's why they need.
comes
that's why
with the
places have
property, and
associations.
you would think that something like the fact that you're part of a drainage district would be something you would learn in the course of acquiring the property.
that would be nice, but that's not the way it is lots of times.
Yeah.
People they have a huge settlement sheets.
Yeah.
Page. And sometimes a lawyer will say, you should pay attention to this.
Yeah.
Before you sign that name. And sometimes they don't.
Yeah, I'm
because-
thinking about this, and when I moved into West Danby, I don't remember anybody telling me that I'm part of a water district.
Right.
Or a school district, or.
I mean, there are lots of
Fire
things I'd like to
district,
see. I'd like to see realtors tell people that before you even buy, you need to look at code.
I mean, it
Yeah.
should be on the deed.
Well, even just look at code and look at requirements for where you're going to move, period. But how do you do that?
Sure.
I mean, I didn't even know half the
So
things.
this
we're
would be,
supposed to have.
you just made the point, if this is something that would be an annual charge, going forward, it's one of those things that as settlement would get, we prorated based on what part of the year you own it, as part of it. So
Oh,
it should be pretty hard not to know that this is an annual charge that you're party to. The weird thing about this one is that it should have been, but wasn't, for the last 20 years because the district didn't get set up.
Yeah, and it is, I think, worth noting that the cost of remediation isn't doubling every year that people aren't paying. So nobody paid last year.
Right.
So paying this year, it's actually less than paying last year and this year, even if there was no
Yeah,
upfront
yeah.
cost increase.
Oh,
Usually if something's maintained and under these circumstances, it sounds like it would be going forward to be more maintained, which means that the likelihood of bigger fees for dredging or whatever else that has to happen to maintain a pond. I don't even know what has to happen to them.
we gotta remove the
Well,
trees.
it's in there, things like.
Yeah, it's all in the report. It's,
Yeah.
once you brush hog out the woody stuff, it's basically mowing. It's not, and, patching the holes from burrowing animals that
Right.
make holes in the edge of the pond kind of things.
But those
Think of all
are
the
unknown
support.
until you can put up a fence and keep an animal out, but you can't. They dig.
Yeah, right.
Anyway.
The darn woodchucks.
There you
Well,
go.
what's the next step with this?
We gotta-
Adopting it if
It's been voted, it's been moved
Moved.
and seconded.
yeah,
Okay.
we could pass it, see what happens. And if we luck out and we don't get a request for referendum, then we're good and we just implement it. If we do, then we'll have to think about how do we inform the voters before the vote.
I mean, it might be worth going over there and holding a meeting with all the residents.
Before they do
Petition.
a petition.
They have
Immediately.
30 days, right?
Explain what it is. David could do that.
I see,
Tomorrow.
I see, just for the reference, Ted's clock, but we did have a public hearing ahead of time, which means we're
Right,
not.
it didn't start until, it was almost 3/4 of an hour, that public hearing.
Yeah. Anyway, I kind of like maybe call the question.
Yeah.
What do you want to call the question?
Oh, my God.
We could take a formal vote on that, or we could just go to the vote if you're ready for it.
Don't call a question, just ask us to vote.
Well, I already did everything I could have, but moved it, it's been seconded.
All right,
Let's vote.
we talked about it, if you're ready.
Yeah.
Okay, Janice, a vote on the motion.
Connors,
Yes,
Hunter,
Yes,
Weisberg,
Yes,
Woodworth,
Yes,
Gagnon.
Yes. All right. Response protocol for email directed to the town board. Leslie made a pass and then I made a pass. There are a couple of minor changes along the way, but mostly it's in what we added was the response, section 4. The response
it looks
policy.
all right with, and for me, I mean, even towards the end of it, I was just like, oh, let's just try it. Try it and, you know, I don't know how important it is that, you know, things with swear words in it get taken out. I mean, that I sort of
yeah, I'm not
agree
too
with.
worried about
oh, the
that.
3.1.4,
Yeah.
you're thinking we could strike that?
I think so.
I think so too.
Yep.
3.1.4.
We'd miss out on a lot of fun, maybe. Maybe we wouldn't get any mail. Not funny.
Well, it's not that there wouldn't be a record of it. It's just that it wouldn't be it wouldn't be entered into any meeting record.
I don't have a problem with it being in a meeting record. It's showing
The
that people are mad and.
The profanity and defamatory statements.
Well, people can
Disrespectful
come here
comment?
and be,
What?
yell at us. And
Exactly.
swear.
Yeah.
People can do it in person, they might as
Right.
well do it on paper. In fact, I prefer that they do it on paper.
Yeah,
Uh-huh. So you want to so you're okay taking it out?
Yes.
Okay. So that's 2, because I took out 3.1.3 because it was a redundant.
Yeah.
So those are the only real changes in the beginning,
Yeah.
except for saying that, you know, the town, they go to the town board when they come. And what we're saying is here that the town clerk acknowledges that there was received, which needs nothing with thank you for your comments. You know, the board got them. And then what we had talked about, which is to say that if somebody wants to respond on behalf of, which is a sort of presumption, if something's directed to the town board, that if you're responding for the group, that we're going to run it by the group before we respond in the name of the group.
right.
Otherwise, if we want to say, you know, I want to respond to Rhonda, but I'm going to say, speaking for myself
Right,
and not for the board,
right.
I think this and that, whatever.
I don't have a problem with trying this and see if it works out. The 24-hour window is a little, I mean, that could be easy to, depending on the time of day, if things get,
Yeah,
you know,
right. But on the other hand, most of the time you don't
24
want a long
I mean,
gap.
if it's an emergency, you know, if it's, you know, if it's a time sensitive thing, the 4.5 sort of
Yeah,
gets on that, but otherwise, I mean, I would say a 48-hour window.
yeah.
Unless it's time sensitive, which is 4.5.
Mhm.
Well, if the mail comes to everybody as it is, the likelihood somebody will see if it looks like it's an emergency and somebody
Yeah,
compared to
yeah,
only one of us seeing something.
right,
No, I mean, the 24-hour window refers to the response.
On behalf of the board.
on behalf of the
On behalf of the board.
yeah,
So,
but-
if, you know, if I write something or you write something, you know, we send it to the board members and we wait a day before we send it on to the recipient.
I think unless it's a time sensitive I think 48 hours would be.
You want more
I
than-
mean,
you
just
want-
because you may go for a day, you may be away for a day.
Right. No, look at
And
your
you're
email.
gonna miss it.
Yeah,
You sneak out some response.
yes, that you might not.
40 to 25 hours. And, but that's just,
Would
that's the only
would I
thing,
do that?
that's the only thing I thought might be worth changing.
The others agree? I'll make it longer.
I agree.
Yeah, 48,
Sure.
okay.
Gone.
May I ask 3.1.1, where's the comment? What does the last sentence mean? So
Oh,
the last sentence, is that you, Leslie?
yeah.
Okay.
3.1.1.
So
I don't know, you didn't
I'm
say-
assuming like someone writes to the board and it's something that clearly involves, let's say, the code enforcer. And so then that would also be forwarded to the
Is that what you were
code
thinking?
enforcer. Is that what we're envisioning there?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I commented to that effect also. I thought it was clear
I didn't
myself.
see it. Well, the way, I don't, maybe it was just the way it was initially worded.
Mhm.
It kind of like, person forwarded to another person.
Yeah, I mean, if
To
the
another
question is
person.
raised that you
To a
couldn't answer, or
non-town
one of
board
us couldn't answer, we probably ask Steve, or we'd
To-
ask David, or, you know,
So
if we thought it was important enough to get a response on.
Okay.
So
then
if the correspondence is forwarded to
Yeah,
a non-board member,
like,
Right.
what you're
case in
saying.
point, somebody had a question about the noise thing, and we consulted
to
with
another
the sheriff
person
on
is
it.
kind of what threw me off.
I mean, maybe instead of another person, can we specify a person who works for the town, just to kind of limit it a little bit?
Well, I mean, why wouldn't you, say
Someone
that, you know,
other than a board member.
well, we could do that. I mean, you.
I mean, I guess conceivably you might want to forward something to the
To the
attorney.
lawyer, yeah.
Attorney, yeah, because then, you know, then it'd be subject to attorney-client privilege anyway, but you might want to consult with the Association of Towns Attorneys. We do that quite a bit, actually. You don't necessarily want to tell everybody. Well, we
I'm
asked.
just trying to
the-
understand the scope of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So I like your suggestion, Steve. It does mean that it could be forwarded to somebody else, some sort of expert, engineer, lawyer. Without telling them, that you did that. But if it's going to be a staff person, you know, the planner or the code officer, we could tell them that. Or we could just don't tell them. We could just. Who put that in there? That's probably Sarah wrote that, right?
Yeah, I don't know, not me, yeah. So what does that last sentence mean with a quote that?
Do we
that
need
should
it?
be crossed off. That's
Do we
not
need it?
part- Huh?
Do we need it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, how often does that happen? If
Well,
something's addressed to the town board.
then we
Well, I
would
could
want to
see, you
consult.
know, sending it to Dave or Steve.
I don't think it actually needs to be included.
But-
If someone sends something to the town board, it's already going into the public domain.
Yeah,
So the fact that you then forward it to someone else, I think is, like, I don't think anyone would have a legitimate claim that their right to privacy had been violated because their email to the board was shared with someone else.
I agree.
I mean, I think it's incumbent on the board, supervisor, to share it appropriately. But
Well, I mean, it would probably share it in your response. You say, wait, I
Right.
checked with the code officer, or I checked with the planner, or I checked with the attorney, and this is what they said. You know, otherwise, why wouldn't, you know, why would you?
I mean,
Mention
you just
it.
don't want, I thought your letter was so inappropriate, I posted on Twitter or something.
I sent it to the South Miami Facebook.
Put it on South Miami Facebook
Yeah.
page. Right.
I think the only thing that Steve, when you said that, it made me think of one possibility. If somebody wrote something and they were hoping that it wouldn't be broadcast, but they really wanted an answer. But So that maybe it should be, because it already is going to all the town board. Maybe the request, we should say to each other, do you think we should send this one on? I mean, there could be, and that might save that. I mean, it's all opinion stuff.
Yeah,
No matter how you
and
look
it's
at it.
all part of the public record too, if you submit a
That's
comment
right.
to the town board.
That's true.
Yep. Yeah, once it's submitted to the town board, it is.
Yeah. So I'm okay with taking that out.
I think maybe we should just take it out.
Let's take it out, and if we need to add something, we can add it back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's gone.
So now it just says that, you know, it's circulated to the board with a copy to the clerk,
Yeah.
which just happens automatically, by the way, because, you know, the clerk is included in, when you send something to town board, town clerk is part of that group. Mhm.
So that very last, this whole mess here gets scratched off.
So we pared it
Okay.
down a little bit,
Yeah.
and then we added the one to basically the response section. So do we have a
Yeah.
motion yet? Mm.
I move that we, revise. So that revised will be up there, and it will be revised May to 2023.
Yeah, that's right. Any further discussion? Ted would like to comment. I don't know that we want to necessarily
The
entertain
only
it.
other thing, I only had one other thing that always bothers me is this title.
What?
I want to say, well, it just sounds redundant.
Town board of the town of Danby.
I know. I want
I
to say
think the
town
board at
board
the end.
correspondence, what do you think?
I want to add the word board at the end of that. So the town board of the town of Danby board.
Right.
No, right. Can we just say,
Correspondence policy for the town board, or for the Danby Town Board.
Town of Danby, that town board of Danby correspondence policy or something. Correspondence policy for
Of the Danby
town,
Town.
board.
Danby Town board,
Great.
that's what I was thinking.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Danby. It's getting late. Danby Town Board. Okay, there.
right?
Okay, correspondence policy for the Danby Town Board.
Who moved it? You did.
Leslie.
Okay, so you can, so.
I moved it and
And-
Catherine
and I
seconded
seconded
it.
So if you're okay with what, that change, it's called a friendly
Yep.
amendment, and it's
Yep.
part of the motion, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we ready yet?
Yeah,
All right. Janice?
Connors,
yes,
Hunter,
Yes.
Weisberg,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes.
Gagnon.
Yes. See. I'm guessing we might want to postpone the goal setting discussion,
Yep.
because a couple of other things we need to get done,
yeah, let's,
including the mowing contract. I would like you to authorize me to choose a provider from among the 4 quotes that I got
that's great.
for mowing. I can share with you the range of quotes that I've got.
Okay,
I had hoped to hear back from Dick Hoos. He was going to call me this afternoon, but he didn't. But I was inclined to divide the work with Dick and one other provider. One of the people who submitted bids said, I want all or nothing,
uh-huh,
but he's also more expensive than everybody else. So it makes it a little bit easier because I don't have to include him. That was I got Dick Hoos from WeMo. I got,
but
Nick-
he didn't,
he did submit a bid.
oh, he did, oh,
He did,
okay,
Yeah.
all right.
He did, in his usual way. And what I did with the others is I shared last year's, accepted contract. So here's, because it gives you what the properties were and so
Right.
forth. I've got one bill, a bid from Nick Cooper in Ithaca that I thought was, didn't make sense because the numbers are just wildly different than anybody else. For instance, Dick had the Peter Road, Bald Hill Road, and Nelson Cemeteries all about the same price. But Nick wanted $300 for the Peter Road Cemetery, $50 for Bald Hill, and $60 for Nelson, which doesn't make any sense. Similarly, the West Danby Cemetery, Dick wanted $313 for it. The other one was Grant Wilbur from Newfield, wanted $295 for it. Nick wanted $65 for it, which is nuts. I mean, I wouldn't want to mow it for $65. It takes you hours to mow that cemetery. And Nick Stanton, Nick Stanton? It's Stanton, but I don't think it's Nick, but, Michael? I don't remember. Anyway, the Stanton bid was $355 for that cemetery. The other ones are more or less in line. The town hall, $143, $140, $162, $135, in the same ballpark. And Jennings Pond, same thing. Well, it ranged from $125 to $205.
Jennings Pond?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right. The town hall, they say 140. Jennings Pond is even, more than the town hall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dick was mowing out onto the, up towards the dam. And I don't know if he had to do that, but that's what he was mowing. More than just the, the immediate area and I don't know if it included the entrance, where the planter is there. Probably.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, probably.
So anyway, there was a fair amount of mowing there. So anyway, there are 4 bids. I'm inclined to split it. Dick might, when I spoke to him last, he was, he's had, his mother's been sick.
Oh.
So he's spending more time taking care of her, which gives him less time to do his other stuff. And he took on a couple of big contracts for firewood, production.
Huh.
So he wasn't sure he wanted to take it, even though he'd submit the quote. So I was waiting to hear back from him. He might not want to do half of it. He might say, let the other guy have it.
Right.
One of the other guys.
Do we have references on these other people?
I didn't ask for references, because I could have to check them out pretty quick if I were going to, but all of them have been doing it for at least a year. They're not startups.
Oh, I would say a year's.
Yeah, I think they're a startup.
I mean.
You say what?
I would say a year is startup for Mowing.
Well, relatively speaking, but I mean, it means that they're not startup,
Yeah.
Well,
As
I
opposed
guess
to,
the
for
benefit-
instance, last year, Michael was interested. But he didn't have the equipment, so, now if he'd taken it on, that would have been a startup.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I think a year is not very much experience, but that doesn't, why don't you see about what Dick does? He say, you haven't heard back from him.
No, I can contact,
I thought you
that's why I'm saying, rather than, pick one
Yeah.
tonight, if you just give me the authority to pick one, having gotten the quotes, which is what was required of me.
Do we need a resolution to give you the authority?
Yeah.
Okay, I move we give the authority to Joel to choose someone to mold it.
Is anybody gonna second that?
I'll second that. I mean, if somebody, I would actually ask for a couple references, I mean, and you have somebody,
If something
have
happens,
somebody
you have to
call.
mow it.
Yeah, exactly. If they don't work out.
But if they don't work out, then we have other people who are willing to do it, and I would have no problem with canceling a contract in the event that it didn't work out.
I don't know. I mean, even one or two phone calls.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you're sort of gearing, you know, if you go to, you know, a reasonable estimate for cost, I mean, you know, and it's one person, I mean.
Yeah,
that's,
it's nice
you
to know what
one
their
or
work
two
is
phone
like, because,
calls.
you know, one of the variables here is, you know, how much, Dick always did it as part of the bid. You know, there's a certain amount of initial cleanup,
Right.
you know,
right.
branches fall, you know,
Right.
you gotta get them out of the way. You know, he does some brush cutting. He doesn't like to mow around things. So, you know, things that were in those cemeteries years ago have disappeared over time.
Yeah.
You know, forsythia bushes, black bushes.
Oh.
They get,
Oh,
you don't have to mow around them if you take them out, you
Oh,
know.
my God. Shouldn't have told me that.
So, but that's Dick, you know, and I tried planning a couple of things and, you know, we'd whack them away, yeah. So anyway, you know, so some of these guys charge extra for, if they have to do any cleanup and so forth, $60 an hour with Nick Cooper, $120 an hour with Stanton, which is pretty good money, I would say.
yeah, I mean, we aren't made of money.
And Grant was willing to say, you know, I'll include that kind of stuff.
Where's Grant from?
Newfield.
Oh,
Well, that was the remaining question for me is, if it were split, could it be split that the people who are down, who don't have to come up and down the hill every time with their vehicles and all the extra gas? That's just a
I
question.
thought about that, except that the only thing that's on that side of the hill is the West
Just the
Danby
cemetery.
Cemetery and the Water District
Well, that's two
postage
things.
stamp thing. Yeah, but that's a, you know, a little bitty thing, but the cemetery's
I
meaningful.
might
but-
like that job, only half of it, but I
Yeah,
might
yeah.
not too. I mean, I don't know, it depends. But bottom line is that it was just a question.
Yeah,
So, and you haven't offered or found the person yet anyway.
well, I haven't decided how to divide it, although I did mention it to Dick that I was thinking of having the West Danby Cemetery and the Water District postage stamp piece be included with the town hall. And then have all the rest, all the other cemeteries be whoever else. And Jennings Pond. Because, you know, they're all over the place. You get Nelson
Right.
Road's over there and Peter Road is down there and, you know, the Bald Hill's over here. So, you know, to get this side of the hill, you're all over the place
Right.
already.
Well, I think we should vote on it.
Which may be
And
why,
decide
you
it.
know, the Stanton doesn't want to do anything other than the whole thing.
So we said we've moved and seconded, and I'm ready to vote.
Okay, Janice?
Yes, Connors,
yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Weisberg,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes.
Gagnon.
Yes. I think I might just call a couple of people though. We're back to the additions. All right, update on the applicability of disorderly conduct. Whoops, we're just about out of time.
Yep.
Oh,
I move we give ourselves 15 more minutes.
Second.
Can I request that you do 3-2 first so that I
Yes.
can go through that motion?
Sure.
let's all take a nap. First,
First we have to do the authorization.
what are we doing here?
It was moved and seconded that we give ourselves enough, that we go to 9 o'clock basically.
Where am I? Where's my agenda?
Here's one.
I keep putting it away.
Shall we vote on it?
Yes,
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I just closed my window.
oh,
Connors,
yes,
Hunter,
Yes.
who's next? Weisberg,
Yes.
Woodworth,
yes,
and Gagnon.
Yes. Yes, choice words. This was the outfit we basically settled on among, so 2 or 3 that we had, it was 2, wasn't it?
We had 3 responses. One of them, I think, calling it a response is not very responsive to what we requested responses to. So we had 2 that were very good. And this one was a little better.
It was a little disappointed that we didn't get one from Tillman. We would have liked to have had, you know, the outfit that's doing the administration of our, you know, housing rehab. Would have been nice to have them, since we're talking about chasing grant money for doing more in the way of affordable housing, to have them do it, but they declined to submit a proposal. So we had to solicit from others. And of the ones that we got, this outfit is actually centered where?
Their headquarters is in the Hudson Valley, but they recently opened an Ithaca office.
Yeah, somebody moved to Ithaca who had been working for them and said, "Oh, this is great. Let's open an office in Ithaca." So, so this is the outfit that we said, okay, let's give them a try.
It does actually bring up one small point, which is we don't actually need to do an RFP process or an RFQ process every time we do this. We could just, you know, it's a professional services contract. We could just hire who we want next time. I was trying to be as transparent and process oriented as possible, but the fact that we didn't get an application from the group that we were working on building a relationship with, managing our, they were just too busy to respond to another one. But we can talk later if you would prefer to not go through a procurement process for this kind of thing.
It could be seen as professional services, for which we don't have to go through this.
Right, I mean, it's not, I mean, even if we don't do it, it's nice to know, like, who the people are, you know, even if we don't have to approve something.
Yeah, so that's why I didn't think it hurt. So I move we authorize me to sign this contract with Choice Words.
Second that.
Any discussion? Not.
Second.
Didn't Nick get seconded? No, that was second.
Leslie seconded.
I did.
Good.
That's your second.
Yeah.
Didn't I?
Yes,
Yeah.
you did.
Yeah. Okay, ready? Janice?
Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes,
Weisberg,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes.
Gagnon.
Yes.
Hi.
Signed, sealed, and delivered.
Oh.
Update on applicability to this currently conduct law. Steve,
Okay,
do you spoke to this,
I spoke to the sheriff's
Derek?
office
Did you
specifically.
talk to Derek?
I did not speak to the sheriff. I spoke with Lieutenant Koskinen, who apparently has been handling this.
Hmm.
What's his last name?
Koskinen, Koskinin.
Oh.
When I called the sheriff's office, they said it'd be actually better to discuss with Lieutenant Koskinen.
They said what?
It would be better to discuss with Lieutenant Koskinen. They directed me to him.
Really?
Yes. So, and Pat and I did talk briefly about, to make sure we're sort of asking the same questions of people. So I asked about his experiences with 24020. I mentioned that it had arisen that maybe this was sufficient in lieu of a noise law. But we had also heard that there were issues. So specifically, and he said yes. He said in 20 years, he's not sure he's ever used 240/20 for a specific, for something like what we are talking about between property owners. And he pointed out the public places part of it. And I think I also shared with everyone the court cases that go around that. So that was one issue, is does it have to be public and what does public mean? What does public mean, right? Right, so specifically, apparently the 240s are a bunch of New York State penal laws. They all have to do with things happening in a public place, which is specifically a place to which the public or a substantial group of persons has access. For example, highways, transportation facilities, schools, amusement parks, playgrounds, public hallways, lobbies. Those are public places. Private property is not a public place. So he was very clear on that. I also, because the question arose, if we passed a Danby law, will the sheriff's department enforce that? And he said, absolutely. And he also spoke on behalf of the state police with that question. He said they routinely enforce local laws. And he said, for instance, Dryden has a local law on noise specifically. Yeah, so does Ithaca. And so does Ithaca. Yeah, both Ithacas. And he also said that, as we know, that law specifically refers to disorderly conduct. And so you have to show intent to disrupt public peace. So, for example, if someone organizes a protest and they lay down on 96B so that no one can drive, that is clearly disrupting public peace. Or if someone came here and made a bunch of noise so that we couldn't conduct a meeting, that would be disrupting public peace. But if it's not specifically in a public place, then you're not disrupting public peace. So again, an example with between two neighbors, this would not apply because you actually can't demonstrate an intent to disrupt public peace. What about what the officer was saying in his thing, which was that intent is important, but that, you know, if an officer comes and says to the noise maker, we've had complaints, and you know, cut it out. That if he then does it again, that demonstrates intent. Because he's been told that it's already disturbing people and he's doing it anyway. That does demonstrate intent, but it doesn't demonstrate intent to disturb public peace. So yeah, it has to be in a public place. Yeah, it's on the question, what do you mean by public? Because even though it's disturbing more than one neighbor, which makes it more than one neighbor is not sufficient. Yeah, it was in the park. That would, right, in the park it would, yeah. But again, it has to be a substantial group of persons has to be affected. So another example here is the front yard of a residence on a residential street where houses were less than 25 feet apart would be considered public, but again, not in general between two neighbors. So, did you mention that Newfield had decided to rely on 202? I did mention Newfield relying on it, and let me see that his exact phrasing here. He said that he talked about enforceability. And he said that noise ordinances are much more enforceable. And that with Newfield, he said they're going to run into the same issue, that if it's not in a public place, I mean, the sheriff's department can show up
they can say, can you turn it down? But if it's not in a public place, then,
then you can't cite somebody.
right.
Of course, we also had police officers saying that, in 20 years, they never actually had to take anybody to court. Which is to say that just doing what we just described is to say, telling people we to turn it down. If people think that there's a law that then, they could be cited, that suffices.
Well,
Yeah.
except we've already heard from complainants who said that they did call the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's department said we can't do anything because it's not a public place.
Mhm.
So in those instances,
Yeah, so we don't know how, I haven't talked to Mike Gallinger in Newfield to know whether or not that's worked out okay for them.
If they, if they tried it.
Well, yeah, I mean, they might say, okay, we'll rely on it, but then, has it been used? I mean, has anybody
Right.
invoked it? I don't know.
right, and I will say in my own experience, the sheriff's department was called and they did come. And their first comment was, wow, that's really unreasonable noise. And their second comment was, but I can't do anything about it.
Mhm.
So,
So they see it as not something that they can do anything about.
because 24020 applies specifically to public places,
Mhm.
If they chose.
if they chose to, but they also know that in the end, it won't be enforceable.
You didn't get to take the police yet, or did
I
you?
haven't heard back.
I haven't heard back.
I will send something, and if I don't hear back, I will contact them again tomorrow.
Mhm.
And I also talked to Warren. He was going to be talking to the district attorney
Oh,
to get back to me.
that's not a bad idea, too.
The district attorney,
Yeah.
District attorney.
So that sounds like more fact finding is warranted before we do anything else. Huh?
Yeah.
I'll make it a point to call Mike, see if there's any kind of feedback. Well, we thought it would work, but it didn't, or,
Yeah, have they tried it? I mean,
or what they did, evidently it was an issue. They asked the planning board to weigh in on, and the planning board recommended that they rely on 204.2.
24020.
And they said, great, we don't have to have a local law, so much the better.
right.
Which was what I like to do if we got.
I'm sure it is, although I actually think that Ted's comment is pertinent. Because we have already had several complaints, and we have had people go to their neighbors and then report that it didn't work out well.
Yeah,
So it would be good if there was something in the penal code that was effective, but I'm reluctant to tell people we'll just use something knowing that in fact it's not enforceable, which it sounds to me is what the town of Newfield did.
yes,
I mean, the village, I mean,
you're kind of far from your mic.
oh, I mean, the village of Endicott was another example who relied on the.
Yes. Complete with a
240.2.
long directions for how to use it.
I know,
Yeah.
but they also, I mean, they have a police department.
Right,
They have a police officer who will help the person go through all these steps, who will help the person file, who will help the person, and so it's just kind of, I wondered if, I wondered if it's because they've got a police officer, but I don't, how can they do it? I mean, maybe I'll call them.
why not? Why not?
See how they do this with the penal law.
But I think an important question, if you're gonna contact
Yeah.
these places that
Yeah.
are using 24020,
Yeah.
is it working for you? Because they're gonna say, it's working great, we don't have any problems.
Right,
To ask if they've actually had any successful enforcement
right,
using 24020.
right.
Well, I mean, it is, if you use 240.2, it's the local judge. So, the two things that have to happen, one, the enforcement officer needs to think that he can use it. And
Right.
and the judge needs to believe that it works, or it can be applied.
Well, it can't be. That's, that's what this is.
Right.
It can't be applied in New York State unless it's in a public place.
So,
And I mean, I know that that's what same feedback from other
we've heard that,
people who complain.
we've heard that before, it's not like that hasn't been said.
Yeah,
It was just a question of whether or not, how is that has that been interpreted by courts, you know?
Well, that's what those documents I shared are. They
Yeah,
list specific court cases and
Right.
precedent.
yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So this has been, basically, it's been, the courts have decided how to interpret it,
yes,
yeah. And it's not the way, Officer, whatever the other guy's name was, I forget.
who I understand, his service was only on campuses.
Really?
Interesting.
Hmm.
Well, I
Who's that?
I believe his name was Ted. I don't remember the
Oh, the
last
person
name.
who-
Yeah, Ted, yeah.
It's funny because
Was-
one of the
something like-
people who had a complaint, who tried getting help and stuff, was a police officer at Pointe.
Yeah, Curtis.
Yeah, Rick, but can't do anything. We don't have a law. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say, again, you can't be heard.
Yep.
Cut that out.
Yeah,
That we've had opinion from lawyers on both sides of this question,
yeah,
and police officers on
Right.
both sides of this question
Right.
regarding the applicability of that section of law, which is why I was like, you know, that was such a detailed and extensive commentary we got from Ted,
right,
whatever his name was, that we did more than suggest, asserted it's not only being that you could use it, but that it was not only that you could use it, but that it was the best thing to use because of its features.
Right.
yeah.
It was
Well, he
particularly well
also
suited
asserted
to
that it could be used in private places, and I remember him saying that in 240, there's like 4 or 5 bullet points, and most of them say in public, and the one pertaining to noise did not have the word public in it. But when you look at the interpretation in courts of law, all of the 240s refer specifically to public places. And that, I think, is the issue.
Yeah.
And, you know, again,
Well, the sheriff is who.
for the purposes of any Article 240 offense, a public place is defined in New York penal law, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
So it doesn't have to have it in every specific clause.
Yes,
Everything in that grouping is for public
Yeah.
spaces.
I did randomly ask somebody that I didn't have any idea what the person would say. What do you think about a noise law? And I just said it, or do you think we would like one or something? And the person quietly said, I think we need to do something. I mean, you never know what you're gonna hear because what we only hear is complaints. And it's not, and we can't make all of decisions based on the loudest complainers. And
Yeah.
that, it's just not an answer, but it is something that we have to consider,
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
even for me, who doesn't like all these, I like to use that phrase nuisance
Yeah.
law business,
yeah.
but
Yeah, it's not about majority rule, because I mean, the Bill of Rights was put into the Constitution because, you know, to keep the majority from running roughshod over, you know, individuals, there should be sort of basic things that you have a right to.
and of course, for me, it's like, I don't want people to be mad at each other, and they'll get mad at each other either way. If somebody makes a lot of noise, the neighbor gets mad. If they call the police, the other neighbor gets mad. I mean, it is a problem.
Yeah,
So wrapping it around, I mean, that's why when we had originally talked to Warren and used that calm language,
I
which is
know.
what I really wanted to hear.
Yeah,
That's what we're still missing.
Yeah.
Calm language.
I mean, I will say parenthetically that after, was that our last meeting? I guess it was our last meeting. One thought I had after some of those particularly belligerent comments was if that was your neighbor and you wanted to have a conversation about them turning it down,
Yeah.
I can see that not going well.
Yeah.
You know, the sort of, I've been here for 30 years sort of attitude.
Yeah.
But what I was going to suggest is I think it would be important if we decide to move forward to meet with some of those people. Rogan comes to mind.
Yeah.
He was quite reasonable.
Yeah.
Steve Seelan, I think,
Mhm.
should be involved to give them an opportunity to voice specific concerns and remedies. Because
Right.
even appreciating what Warren has done, we know that what we have is still imperfect.
Yeah.
Well, and he didn't bring that language that he used when he wrote to us in the way back. He
Oh.
didn't bring that into this.
Yeah.
The language was the calming thing. Well, this wasn't calm. Yeah, so it's unfortunate. And
Yeah, well, I mean, what he brought forth was like the most common components of most of the laws that he
Right.
saw. you
Yeah.
know, And they're not common.
What he didn't do was what he did at the meeting before for us. He had that statement that he read. That was a very effective statement. And I did call him and ask him, and that's the one he wrote and put in with the, so it was online
Mhm.
with the document itself.
Yeah.
That's the kind of statement. It has nothing to do with the law itself.
Yeah.
That's the kind of statement that would be very helpful up front.
But I also agree with Steve. We need to have people who, on both sides of issues, be able to talk about it. I think it's important. And
I think it would be helpful, a small group, not
Yeah.
50 angry people in a room.
right.
And you know, there's not, I don't think there's a whole lot of point in talking to somebody whose opinion is, we don't need a law. I don't care what's in it. We shouldn't have it at all, period. I think I have concluded that we need something. You know, if we don't have a law that we can use, then we need something. So I'm not, you'd have a hard time convincing me that we don't need something. So I'm not sure how useful it is if you're trying to craft a law that does something to include the people who say you shouldn't do anything.
Well, I think a crowd, what happened was that angry side of how those people feel. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean that there's not a reasonable tone or not a reasonable conversation yet to be had. People, it's reactions. It was reaction behavior.
Yeah, it was.
It was a mob.
Yeah,
Well, the group, the folks that ended up staying to the end,
right.
Yeah,
I actually thought most of that conversation went pretty well.
I thought
I mean,
so.
Can't hear.
Again, you're not,
People were, I keep,
Yeah, pull your
well, you
mic
can
up.
do it fine if you pull your mic forward, but
blocking.
not if you're not going to lean back.
There you go.
but, I felt like the folks who stayed to the bitter end, were maybe interested in talking more about it
Yeah.
and actually coming up with, examples of things and, wanting to know what the complaints had been and I, it was
Yeah,
it was a
because
different group.
I did too. I mean, I thought, those people were
Was a nice
people you could work
conversation.
with to come up with something that would be,
Right.
address the real issue and not overstep, which is
Right.
what everybody was worried about,
Right.
curtailing our traditional activity, which we're not out to do. But,
Right. And it's an issue for some residents. It's not an issue for, I think it was at Warren that talked about, 1% of the 1% of the folks in town may have to ever deal with it, but there are residents who suffer, from experiences that the town needs to have something to help.
Well, that's what basically what
Even-
Warren said, you know, for 99% of the people
Right.
in the town, this is not gonna affect them one way or the other.
right.
It's the fallback position when all else fails.
Yeah,
You need to have something. There's no point in having negotiative, a negotiating
Right.
team, any other mechanism, unless there's something to fall back on if people don't want to cooperate.
right,
If your neighbor blows you off, then what?
right. I mean, I did sort of hope that we'd have something that was more, I originally had hoped Warren would come back with, I found this town and they have this great thing and they've got, you know, a little committee that goes out, you know,
Yeah,
and not a law, but, you know, I think it'd be nice to have something that was a little more gradual. I think it was people, you know, the $200 fine for the first offense.
yeah, but
I
it's
think
not a
was-
given, it's an up
It
to.
was up to.
Yeah,
right.
I know,
I
but,
mean, it
you
could be
know,
$10 if the judge thought it was,
I know.
you know,
Well, we also have a situation where a judge said they weren't gonna uphold the law if it was passed. So I'm not sure what we'll do, but,
well, you know, in that event, it becomes an issue when it comes time to elect a judge, you know. But
right, well, for some people.
Mhm.
But, you know, it'd be nice to have something that was, you know, some people don't have money. I mean, here we go, I go back on, you know, not wanting to, you know. some
Yeah, those people have to be careful that they don't speed and.
Yeah, yeah. So, anyway,
Uh,
so we'll gather more information,
Gather
Maybe-
more information and maybe we can
talk
think
to the
about,
state police, right?
Yeah,
maybe we can think about inviting, I don't want to call it a committee,
Yeah.
but some sort of a work group, I guess, to try to modify. I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse, but I
Oh,
also, well, I'm cognizant that I'm a short timer here. So I'm happy to take it on the chin
Yeah.
for
and
this
then,
one,
and then leave town, right?
and then leave town, right? No, but I do think that that would be effective, and I think it would dispel some of those concerns. If you could get some of those people who stayed to say, well, actually, we worked on this and it's not gonna affect us at all. I can use my UTV, I can run my
Yeah,
chainsaw, I can have a generator if the power goes out,
yeah,
I can have a birthday party.
yeah.
Which I feel like those things were in there. I mean,
Right, right.
Warren kept saying it would be good if people read it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
and I heard your suggestion, you know, if there's something we didn't mention in the list, you know, we could add it to the list and.
yeah.
And we also got a couple of people objecting to the things that are on the list as not being included too.
I only heard one thing that it should have been on the list that wasn't, or it was that you can actually hunt at night.
Yes,
You
Yeah.
can shoot guns at night.
not to mention that it hasn't happened in 60 years or whatever, because nobody does furs anymore, but.
Well, my neighbors all shoot something at night.
Yeah.
But you know, in the manual, the hunting DEC, you can, you know, it's people shooting coyotes and bobcat.
Yeah. Well, anyway, but that would be, you know, ag and markets would exempt that kind of activity anyway.
Right, well, it's DEC says you can hunt at night, you can shoot your gun at night.
Yeah.
So having it in the law saying no shooting guns at night is,
Right.
but, you know, it'd be good to beef
Clarify.
up on what DEC, ag and, not even
We could
really,
just say legal.
a different,
Well, you can
different entities say that
obviously,
you
yeah.
can, you know, you
Yeah.
can do certain things.
Yeah, well, the broader language is just basically saying, you know, you know, except where state law or other agencies,
Right.
you know, specifically allows it.
Right,
Ooh, I see you're past now.
okay, let's
Yeah, we
go.
about have,
Oh.
yeah. There's one more item though, which I kind of like to have Catherine here for, because it was the work for the workstations and access points.
Oh, didn't we already discuss that?
Well,
You said we have to, it's a quote, we have to approve it and then we can actually pay it when the bill comes.
right,
So we have to,
Okay, so we have to
yeah, I move we approve the quote.
second,
You know, my only misgiving was this was, I mean, what was the rationale for my having a computer?
Well, I was curious, I think it mentions 4 computers, and those, by the way, are very pricey laptops.
I thought there were 2, considering that when more and more we're talking about storage in the cloud, so you don't need a capacity in the machine. Why do we have, you know, fairly fancy machine
They're
for,
not fancy machines. They're solid machines. They're very good machines. Charlie's bought them for years.
so they're it's solid in such as in durable.
Strong, durable.
Yeah. Like this machine, which had been using.
That thing's gotta go.
Why? What's wrong with it? Yeah. You'll notice that, you know, remember I had a problem with the microphone?
Yeah.
It went away.
It went,
And then I had a problem with the camera
and it went away.
and it went away. So it's working fine.
Yeah.
Why should I replace it? You know,
I have to.
if all you're doing is emails and wordsmithing, you don't need a fancy
Okay,
computer.
are we gonna vote on this?
Just in time.
Okay, or
Yeah,
For
we're just questioning, why are we buying these expensive machines for?
we think those are good prices.
Yeah,
They're
they're
really
not-
good prices.
They're not bad prices.
They're not
Yeah.
bad prices, you know.
Not at all.
No, they're not.
No, I paid more than twice that for one of mine. So, yeah. So, yeah,
How come we pay so much? When we
Not a
don't
lot.
need,
because you want to get cyber insurance, you have to get, they're not the ones that we have, well, we don't even qualify with that anymore.
so it's a quality issue as much as.
No, it's not the quality that when you're talking about, you think that the quality is the price?
Well, I mean, Steve mentioned it and I had the same thought, was that they're awfully pricey machines, given what we need to do with them.
The people that work all the time don't want a crap machine. That's a pain in the ass if we're
Right.
doing it 8 hours a day.
There's
Jeez.
when you find out how much easier it is, I think you'll find out. But anyway, that's a good question for, if you want, I'll get you a list of why, and then I'll mail it back out to
Yeah.
you. It's-
Yeah, I'm not thrilled with having to have 3 computers now, because so that one dedicated to town work, but.
Your computer
That's
isn't
why we
even
want the
supportable,
security.
but I'm the wrong one to have this discussion with, because I know how stubborn you are, and I know that this is important.
Well, it's not that, you know, I'm not you can't,
It's
yes,
20,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
We're past.
I'll get you
past
some-
time
I'll
to vote
get-
at your
yeah.
committee.
I'll get.
But it looks like I'm gonna have 3 computers, you know, and one of which is gonna be dedicated to town stuff.
That would be good.
I suppose I'll need another workstation to clear, I have to clear off the desk in my house.
Yeah, these are your problems,
Yeah.
not the rest of us.
Yeah, making work for me.
Yes, that's
We
well.
have a motion on the floor.
The motion is to approve the quote, right?
Yes.
Or accept the quote.
Accept the quote, yeah. And then we get billed when they actually get purchased,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And installed.
yeah.
Will the amount of the quote be specified in public?
In what?
What is the amount of the
Yeah.
quote?
Right, normally this would have been attached to the agenda.
No, it was not.
No.
It wasn't though.
It's within the figures that we had for the plan with the contract.
Well, you could share it. It's not that, it's only a couple of numbers.
$6,286
Oh, yeah.
4
And then-
laptops at a price of $5,112. 3 Ubiquity Unify wireless access points for $582. And 4 BenQ 21.5-inch LCD monitors for $592.
Yeah, if you wanted to see it, you could share it online, but all the specs are on there, but
Yeah. We could have done it, but we didn't have it. Should have done it, in fact, but we didn't.
that's why I wrote it last week.
I know,
We
I know.
not.
I'm not faulting you, faulting me.
All right, so shall we vote?
Are you ready? Yeah, okay.
Connors, what?
Yes,
Aye.
she
I think-
said yes.
Thank you. Hunter,
Yes.
Weisberg,
Yes,
Woodworth,
Yes.
Kenyon.
I abstain. For a change.
Okay.
Okay, I think that got us through the agenda, unless you want to talk about what to put on next time. Right, it'll just, stuff will just appear. Yeah. All right, the meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.